Good morning, good morning, good morning, amazing law nerd. It's the very end of March, and honestly, I thought we might still be in the Kouri Richins trial at this point. I wasn't quite sure. It seemed like it might have wrapped up the 27th, but then, as we all know, it wrapped up way before we expected because, well, the defense said they had a whole bunch of a case. And then when it got to it, we didn't have a whole bunch of a defense case. We had much less of a defense case than anyone anticipated. But in the time since that case wrapped up, I had the opportunity to connect with the private investigator that you saw in trial the same way I did, Mr. Todd Gabler. And so today I'm bringing you our conversation. Time zones being what they are, we recorded this conversation, cleaned up just a few little background noises, and bring you the unedited conversation. A few reminders. I'm not going anywhere. We have conversation to have after this because I reached out for follow-up comment after this interview on a point in the interview, and I'm not going to spoil it because there is a point in the interview you're going to be like, wait, what's the answer? I've got you. It's not about Bryce's pants, but I've got you. So do not worry. We will get there. Also, Mr. Gabler's talking to me in his own capacity, not as a representative of the Eric Richins Family Trust, not as a representative of the Richins family. And there are still ongoing numerous civil litigations, and there still is an ongoing criminal case. So there are some things where you might be like, Emily, but you didn't ask. Yes, there are some things that I do not ask because there are areas we are not delving into with regard to the pending case or the estate litigation. So we really do talk about what happened in court, what he heard Kouri Richins say about him while he was in court. That phone call, you remember Kouri called him prior to her arrest? We talk about that. We talk about that cross-examination. Oh, we do. We talk about those text messages. We talk about the text that they were trying to make fetch happen. And we talk about why he was tracking cars. We talk about the investigation into Mexico. There are things in this interview I had no idea about that I did not know. And the way that Kouri wanted to keep an eye on Mr. Gabler while he was testifying, and his impressions of how he saw the jury reacting to some of those interactions during his testimony. Because remember, this man's been in court a whole lot, but testifying for the prosecution is something new to him. And oh boy, we have a lot to talk about. So law nerds, today we are going to Utah with a brief stop. Well, you will hear where Mr. Gabler is coming in from. We talk about it in the interview. I will be in the chat. I will be back with you after our interview. But when I say investigators know all the things, investigators know all the things. I am so glad that he wanted to speak with me and with the law nerds. I am so glad that I can bring this to you today. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for you to hear this. Also, you will see my face at one point. There is a very long backstory about what happened with all of my sound interfaces, but at one point he says the FBI, and I actually had to fight everything in my soul not to hit the soundbite, because I was like, we're in an interview. I can't just like whack the soundbite at you. It's too much. It's too much. But know that in my soul, I was just like, no, Emily, no FBI soundbite. We're gonna have to listen. We're gonna have to hear it in our heads. The FBI, yeah, we're going to have to hear it. So with all of that, we are going to roll the intro. We're going to fly to Utah. We are going to talk to the fascinating private investigator. I think most of your favorite witness this trial. There were a lot of great witnesses, and the cross-examination of Todd Gabler was epic on a different level. It was just epic on a different level. And you'll see that. You'll absolutely see that. So, law nerds, let's roll the intro. Let's go to Utah. And I think, like, literally, let's have a kiki because there is so much to talk about. Let's go. Emily, it's not going to work if you don't put your sound in the right place. I know. It's not even April 1st yet. And I know. Of course, we're professionals. Let's go. Hey there, I'm lawyer and legal analyst Emily D. Baker, and this is your go-to destination for live court coverage. I break down the law, the strategy, and the evidence in real time, so you know what's happening. No law degree required. So join the law nerds in the chat. They're here for the facts, not and let's get to court. Welcome, Todd Gabler. I'm so excited to chat with you today. Welcome. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you. I'm a lurker in the law nerd world. I love to hear what you have to say and what your viewers have to say. It's a great perspective to have.
Well, welcome. And I do have to say, before we started recording, we were talking about the fact that we were ready to be hydrated, and both were drinking the same Waterloo. So cheers from, here to there with the waters, because we are both ready to go. But when you talk about the law nerd community, it does sound like you are a bit familiar with our community here on the internet. That doesn't surprise me terribly, because I've been covering this since the bond hearing, and we just went back and watched it, and you're sitting right there in the bond hearing in the earliest days of this case.
Yeah, that was an interesting hearing, and I'd gone back to watch it again, knowing, how everything turned out. And I was really struck by Amy Richins' statement, the victim impact statement.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so prescient to look back and know that what she was saying was true. It all turned out to be true.
Absolutely.
It's also a very emotional speech for me. I think that it appropriately reflects the sort of terror that this situation represents to a family. Terror, not necessarily in the normal course, the normal understanding of that word, but just a grief that is so gripping, so overwhelming, and to have a perpetrator who is out there, not in custody. It's a tough thing when you lost someone.
You, for those who may not remember from your testimony in the Kouri Richins trial, you were brought in very early days in this trial from the attorney who was handling the estate, is my recollection. And you were brought in because Kouri sued the estate. And that pulled you into this case more than a year before she got arrested. So you were living with this well before Kouri was ever arrested.
Yeah, that's true. It was a little lonely out there on this case for a while, but I think that everything happens in its own time. Everything unfolds the way it unfolds. There's not a lot that I can think back on and say, oh, had we done this, it would have been faster. I thought we did everything that we could do to make sure that we were properly investigating the case, both for the civil aspect of it, and then in the course of that civil investigation, when I saw anything that appeared to me to be obviously important to the criminal case, as I testified, I would, make the appropriate contact, and law enforcement would say, oh yeah, we want that, or no, we don't care. So there were both kinds of instances. So that was the investigative part of it, and the other aspect of this, which really, it cannot be overly stated, the kind of grief that you're experiencing when someone has done this to your son or brother, it's excruciating. And I also know, personally, I know I've lost my own brother. I know what that feels like, what it looks like. Yeah. I empathize with this family a great deal. So
absolutely. And you were part of their team from the earliest days here, and you've been a private investigator in Utah for how many years now? I'm going to let you give us a little bit of your background, but you have an extensive work history as a private investigator and have worked with mostly defense and then private cases like, I imagine, divorce, estate, somebody suspecting somebody's having an affair, those sorts of cases. But if you'll give us a little bit of your background before we get back into not just this case in this trial, but the journey of it. Of course, just a note for those of you newer to this case, there is still an ongoing criminal case and there are numerous ongoing civil cases. So there will be things when you're like, Emily, no, and I am sidestepping those things because Mr. Gabler and I know those parameters well of what we can and can't talk about. So I'm keeping that in mind as we get into this too.
Thanks. I appreciate that. The least favorite part of any interview is me talking about myself or my experience. So this will be short.
This is why you're not a YouTuber then, Mr. Gabler.
I for the last 34 years, this private investigation has been my full-time job. And so that's involved travel to 23 countries on 5 continents. I've handled every manner of civil and criminal investigation. My early experience was with the CJA panel, which is the sort of the equivalent of a public defender's office at the federal level. This is prior to the establishment of the federal defender's office in Utah, which is now the full-time agency that defends people accused of federal crimes. So I began there, and I began organizing litigation, large-scale criminal investigations that were conducted by the FBI primarily, but by other federal law enforcement agencies. These are big cases, big documents, lots of, I think the very first case I worked on, there were 17 co-defendants and a 95-count indictment with 340 victims. Okay, so
that sounds like the feds.
Yeah. Yep. And so my job was to sort of collate all of this and then to organize interviews of all of these victims to find out if this, in fact, was their statement. And so we found some interesting things. At any rate,
how many banker's boxes was it an entire office of boxes, just an office of numbered boxes?
Yeah, it was a lot of boxes. And this is 1992. And so we're still dealing with paper and digitizing all of these was the real challenge. And I was developing a relational database, what we called it a relational database back then. Now we just call it Excel, basically, advanced Excel.
But it's just a spreadsheet.
It was about coordinating the victims and the FBI agent that interviewed them and the salesman that apparently defrauded them. And what we found out was that the statements about how they were defrauded correlated with the FBI agent more than it did with the person they spoke to. So as we organized everything by FBI agent, we started seeing the same verbiage, the same things that they said they were told. But that was the only correlation. It was never correlated to who they spoke to. So that was a super interesting thing. And it led to a pretty favorable resolution for the defense in that case. Anyway, that was the early case. And I continued to work on computers as they emerged, and then cell phones and other things. And I've traveled to Colombia and Bolivia and Brazil and Africa, Southeast Asia, all over Europe. Those were primarily cases in the early days involving child abductions, child kidnappings to non-Hague Treaty countries, and also hunting down the sources of a child's sexual abuse materials to their source, which in the 90s, it was the Wild West. Like today, it's a very refined process that goes from a task force to an attorney general's office and then down to the police department level. Back then, it was U.S. Customs flailing about going, hey, what are we going to do with all of this? So, yeah, that's kind of where it all began and sort of where I went. And I promised to make that short, but that went on way too long. I'm sorry.
No, it did not. It's fascinating. And I jump in because as the law nerds know, I really very much enjoyed paper cases, complex fraud cases. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office prior as a law clerk prior to joining the LA County District Attorney's Office. I enjoyed, same as you, computers and technology. I really just am nosy and like other people's business, and their bank accounts will tell on them because nobody ever thinks about it. In a lot of the cases I was handling, no one thought about what their bank accounts were telling that they were doing. And it became an easy way to kind of go sideways at it and try to figure out the schemes that were happening versus some of the more physical crimes and the gang crimes and the shootings that it sounds somewhat callous, but they can get fairly repetitive. Somebody's mad at someone and then punches and or stabs and or shoots and or tries to hit with a vehicle, and they kind of follow the same pattern. But fraud cases, though there are patterns, there's quite a lot of variance, and it's more of an intellectual challenge to kind of track that down, and it's a very interesting thing. So I'm, as you're talking about boxes and boxes of documents, I'm like, yes, that is my world. And I tell people when they are nosy, investigation is a great way to go because you get a lot of information.
It is. There's a ton of information. And, my job at a trial where I'm the primary agent for the defense or for the plaintiff or defendant, as it turns out, my job is to master all of the evidence. And because the lawyer is typically looking at me and saying, hey, where's this document? Hey, where's that audio recording? I don't know is not an acceptable answer when you're seated at counsel table. It's just not an answer that's ever acceptable when you're mastering the evidence. And so, all of my sort of OCD behaviors were very much channeled into knowing where every document was, every witness, every bit of testimony. I did a lot of stuff in media, so I would do excerpts from videos or audios and have to work with those a lot, which was great because I had a degree in communications from the University of Utah. And so I did put some of that to use. I just felt like this job, I put all of the jobs I'd ever done, I brought all of them to bear in my career as an investigator. And as I look back on it, I like it gives a really nice symmetry to what my career was for 34 years.
Absolutely. And we saw that mastery of the evidence, I think, highlighted in your testimony because you knew, more than I think the defense attorneys in the courtroom did for sure. And you could see that mastery of the evidence, which, given the fact that you were just weeks out of a pretty significant surgery, is not just impressive, but also a little mind-boggling for me. I have shared about my own spinal fusion L5-S1, but you were at a multi-level fusion prior to trial. And I wanted to ask how you are recovering now. And then what that was like knowing that you were having surgery and knowing you were going to be testifying at trial and having to get into trial, bringing your neck brace and bringing to bear what may.
I'd really hope not to have to use my neck brace, but I don't know if you saw it on the stand, but my head started to kind of my chin would dip a little bit. And because the posterior cervical entry, so it's C3 to T1 is where I'm fused.
Yeah.
And they have to cut away all the muscle and ligature in order to get that fixation on the back. A lot of people, mostly they do it anterior. They go in through here. But because mine was so extensive, they just said, no, it's not a realistic chance. They'd have to move too much tissue in my throat to get to that. So they cut all of that muscle, your traps, everything is cut off your neck. And, I had a choice to make. I could have the surgery when I did, and then see if I could make it to trial without the brace and without needing a walker. But the other choice was not to get the surgery, in which case I would be in a wheelchair without the use of my arms or legs, and I would be significantly impaired. I had a serious spinal cord injury, and I had to do for myself.
You had to take care of
required. Yeah. So, for me, that decision was pretty easy. The 6.5-hour flight back to Salt Lake City was torture. It was really awful.
Yeah, I can
I don't know if you
imagine.
can see that I'm on the witness stand. I'm not comfortable. I am in some pain. Mostly now, my condition is I haven't had my brace on for about 6 days, so I'm doing much better. I'm in physical therapy. I'm recovering. It's a 12-month recovery. So I've got 9 more months to go, and it's workout for 30 minutes in the morning, get some lunch, workout for 30 minutes after lunch, do the same in the evening, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat for
Re-
another nine
Recovery's
months, and I'll
tough.
be good as new. I don't know how I would change that or what I could do differently to make that easier. But there's something strange about pain that can focus your mind in a way that is hard to describe. I am in pain, but I am also using my brain to sort of deconstruct that pain to get some cognitive relief about the pain that's hitting my head. And then I'm focused solely on the job in front of me. What did I do in this case? What happened here? What are you asking me? What is the exact thing you're asking me? So I think you'll see in my testimony where I pause, maybe for a little longer than is comfortable, and that is as much about me thinking over my answer as it is disrupting the flow of the cross-examination. So that's one of the nuts and bolts of cross-examination when you're in the witness box that I talk to people about. It's about disrupting the flow, because I think you can see in her cross-examination of me, when she gets into a flow and I start saying yes, yes, or correct, correct, correct. That's an old trick. Get somebody to say yes 3 or 4 times, and no matter what you
And
say the
then,
fifth time, they're going to get a yes,
right.
even if they have to correct themselves and mean, oh, yes, I mean, no, no, no.
Hmm.
That's a well-known phenomenon. But it's about timing, cadence, rhythm. When they're on a roll, they're rolling and they're getting the answers they want. And that's when you got to kind of just pull the reins back a little bit and go, I don't know, let's think about this for a second. So
And
you
there's
probably see
nothing
that
wrong with that
tactic.
pause. You
Yeah.
do, but you say longer than necessary, though, when you're testifying, taking a pause to really think about what's being asked. And I
Yeah.
think you highlighted not just that you paused, but in your answers, you could see that you were also highlighting the insinuations. And witnesses that haven't been in court a lot don't always pick up on the insinuations that are coming. And then some witnesses pick up on insinuations that aren't there at all, which was not you either. And I think because of how strongly she kind of came at you at the beginning of Cross, it didn't feel as if you were just pushing back on her to push back for no reason. It felt in line. And we will definitely get to Cross. But also, to be fair to you, with a posterior fusion, she was asking you to look down at the monitor quite a lot. I don't know what else you could have done in that circumstance differently when being asked to look down, which I'm sure is the thing your doctor said you need a brace to make sure you're not doing.
Yeah, well, it's just that I couldn't physically keep my chin up. It's
Yeah.
just that simple.
It's
And so yeah, looking down just as I'm doing it right now, that's like a maximum exercise for me right
don't do
now.
that. We don't
It's
need,
okay.
but
I'm
it
cleared. I'm
is.
cleared to do
It's
it. I haven't got any. I haven't gotten to the ocean to swim yet, but I'm hoping for that very soon. Yeah. Also, I mean, the witness box is an interesting place. I don't think most people really understand how nerve-wracking it is to be in a witness box. It's serious. Like there's no equal to it in my experience. Maybe like that feeling when I first jumped out of a plane with a parachute. Just that moment where you just like, oh, everything is on the line. And that's what it feels like to be in the witness box. Like everyone's looking at you. In this case, of course, you know that everybody outside the courtroom is also looking at you. But when the eyes are on you physically, you're in that environment, it's very serious. And I guess I laughed maybe a little more than I should have, but only at things that I thought were
I don't quibble
laughable.
with
I
it.
mean, like
It was not
this is
inappropriate
serious.
laughter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but this is as serious as it gets. This is about a man's life, and this is about the life of another person, and it doesn't get any more serious than this. So,
Absolutely.
that drives the investigation, that drives the intensity, but it also drives the intensity in the witness box when everything is on the line. And so you feel that and you have to process that. And I think a lot of people are not well suited for it. I don't think that they're hiding anything, but their nervousness makes them appear as though they just couldn't say the right thing. I don't know. I went back and looked at all of the witnesses in this case after I testified because I was not allowed to. The exclusionary rule was in play, and so typically I'm an expert or I'm exempt from the exclusionary rule. So it's very interesting not to be able to watch that before I testified. But I went back and I watched, and I really thought there was a lot of people, just normal people, who did really well. Uh, and I think that has to do with the atmosphere that's established by the judge. Like there are cases where a judge comes in and is just obviously not as fair as you would like. That's the nice way of putting it. And everybody can
Yes.
tell. It affects the whole. I can't say je ne sais quoi, can I? On Law Nerds, can I use language like that?
You can, but it's the energy. It's the vibes. We can go with vibes. It affects the vibes of the courtroom.
Yeah, and it affects everybody in the courtroom, and most importantly, the defendant, obviously, but the witnesses too. I mean, you're in between. You're right next to the judge in this court, and off to the left is the jury. Yeah, it definitely affects it, and so as I'm sure you could tell from the outside, this judge is, man, he is calm. This dude is zen calm, and that transmits to everybody in that courtroom.
I love hearing that because you can see it and you can get a sense for it, but we're not the ones walking into court. And I actually thought the cane was a killer vibe as you walked into court. And you obviously, Attorney Bloodworth asked you if you were recovering from something. You were able to tell the jury what that was, but it was a swaggery moment, and you are walking into that courtroom with all eyes on you. And then you're also more limited in how you can look at everyone else, which is somewhat surreal. But
yeah,
when did you notice? Yes.
This is how I get to look.
Did you see the jury looking at you as you were coming in? And because they all turned to the doors to look at you like you're walking down the aisle at a wedding, I imagine.
Yeah, there's eye contact with the jurors. My practice in testifying is to make eye contact with each of them individually as I'm testifying, and just let them know that I acknowledge them, that I'm there for them. That's truly what it is. A lot of people get caught up in the red team versus blue team type of advocacy, and this is an adversarial system to be sure. But my job, and particularly when I'm being subpoenaed to testify before a jury, my job is to help them find the truth. That's it. There's no red or blue about that. Sure, there are things that I can't say, confidential communications between my client, for example. I can't testify to those, but illuminating the truth for the jury, that's the job. When you're in that box, you got to do your best to make sure that the fact finder has the information available to them. And oftentimes that's only as good as the questions you're asked, right? Like there's so much about this case that was not covered in this trial. Not just my testimony, like the entire trial. You saw a lot of evidence that wasn't in this.
And we'll get there.
Yeah, okay, cool. Let's do that.
We'll talk about the evidence that didn't come in, but you're looking at the jurors, they're looking at you, and then you get up to the witness stand. Do you notice if Kouri and her attorneys are looking at you, or were you kind of locked in on the prosecutor as you get up to start testifying?
Yeah, so I wasn't tracking the lawyers. I know the lawyers. I know who they are. I know what they're doing. I know, generally speaking, what's coming. My long career was on that side of the courtroom, so I get it. Kouri is eyes locked on me, and she remains eyes locked on me. I don't know if you get to see this from your perspective, but the eyes are trying to burn a hole in the back of my head with the laser beams that are coming out of her eyes, right? I'm getting this very intense stare from her. At one point, I think there was a break. I went back to the recording and I tried to locate this, but it doesn't show her face. It shows me smirking, I think. And what I'm smirking at is that I have returned her stare. After putting up with it through the direct and part of the cross, I just looked straight back at her. And it was this look. I know you did it kind of look, you know?
Yeah.
And she looked down, her eyelids dropped and she looked down and her head dropped a little bit. And I saw that again when the verdict was read. But I also saw her thereafter not looking at me, looking everywhere else but at me. And I was grateful for that.
Court cameras did a pretty good job of getting back to her when she was mouthing things under her breath at some witnesses. There were times where you could see her saying, "What?" When Josh Grossman was on the stand, she was just eating snacks or whatever and putting on lip gloss. But there were moments where they cut away from your testimony to show her face, and you could see that she was looking at you. I didn't notice her looking at the jury based on what cameras caught as often as some other defendants, but we did frequently see her looking at the witnesses, and it sounds like that stare was more intense in the courtroom than cameras can necessarily account for.
Yeah, and I at one point I caught a statement and they were discussing, I think they were discussing whether or not to impeach me with some material regarding me stopped outside of her house watching her. So what happens there is that we do surveillance by driving by. I can see what lights are on, where they are, what cars are in the driveway. We don't stop. In a town like Francis, Utah, you're not long for the job if you're parked in a car in a rural area in Utah. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But right after that, she says, he's obsessed with me. That's what she's saying in the courtroom.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm a private investigator. It's my job.
Yeah.
I'm not a girl. We're not obsessed with you. Oh, that tracks from, I'm sorry.
That's how she saw
everything we've seen. Yeah. That tracks. Of course, it's not he's investigating me. It's not he's investigating the estate. It's not that there's this other case with 26 plus financial crimes. No, it couldn't be any of that.
Couldn't be any of that.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
Exactly.
Gosh, that tracks. That must have been a moment for you to not start laughing.
Well, I mean, no, you can see the big
the smirk.
Can't help it. Okay, first of all, that tracks with everything I know about Kouri Richins, right? It tracks with everything I know about her, that she's involved in some kind of totally superficial, obsessive kind of thing when I don't care. I just don't. She's a subject of my investigation. I can see why she would think it's an obsession of mine, but that's not what it's about, I guarantee you.
But we saw that in the Walk the Dog letter, the unredacted, where she's talking about her sister-in-laws who are ultimately who hired you. They are your clients, but she's talking about her sister-in-laws. And in the unredacted Walk the Dog, which I think is a great example of why sometimes these things don't come in at trial, because it doesn't help decide what Kouri did. It just makes you hate her. But she's talking about trying to get her nieces and nephews' photos to national media to get at her sister-in-laws and get under their skin. And you can see that she perceives that they all are jealous of her. And I'm not surprised that when you're investigating her takeaway is he's so obsessed with me driving by the house, because for a year you're investigating for the estate before she's arrested. I'm sure you're driving by the house. And they asked you about that in cross. I think we should just get into talking about cross a little bit more, because you get into court, you have the very normal direct examination with attorney Bloodworth. The highlight for me as someone who worked in the court system was how profound it is that you've never testified on behalf of the prosecution, because you work as a defense investigator. You're like the investigating officer for the defense in most cases. So you're not going to testify. That's a pretty unusual thing that you're being called in that way. And that was a huge takeaway for me, that you were, you know, your entire career, if you weren't working in civil and divorces, you were working as a defense investigator. So working with the prosecution must have been odd.
Well, it was odd, but it also gives me the ability to bring a perspective to the investigation, which law enforcement cannot do. I am interested in not just a fact, but I'm interested in the context around that fact. I am, you know, as an example, law enforcement may decide that any kind of controlled substance is illegal and you should be arrested and go to jail for it. But that's not really what the law entitles. You know, there's more context, there's classification, there's more nuance, there's other things that go on. In this particular case, the difference was between THC gummies and fentanyl, right? So I think we can all agree that those are two radically different things. Just because they're illicit substances together, classified as illegal, that does not mean that they are the same. And so,
not at all. I was so sick of hearing about the THC gummies. I'm like, oh my God, give a gummy a break. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Totally irrelevant to this case. Had nothing to do with anything. The only reason why it was part of this case is that Kouri had suggested early on that the gummies may have been laced with fentanyl. That's a non-starter for me. First of all, because these are retail THC gummies bought in Nevada or Colorado. And so you're not going to see illicit substances in those because they're audited by the state regulatory authority. It would be very bad for business to have any fentanyl in those retail gummies. So that just didn't make any sense to me. It was just another way to distance herself from whatever was going on and to suggest that the victim had done this to himself, which is ridiculous.
It's preposterous. And I note that you said from Colorado or Nevada, not from Mexico, because you can easily go procure legal gummies with THC in them over the border from Utah in either of those two states.
That's correct.
As we're going through the cross-examination, my first question, before I get to some of the areas that I hope we can expand on a little bit from the cross, because I still have questions, and my questions are like, ooh, I wonder if, and they're things that Attorney Bloodworth didn't follow up on, I think, because some of them are due to pretrial rulings and some of them are, he kept his case incredibly narrow and he wasn't going to chase down kind of the rabbit holes that the defense threw out there. He was incredibly focused. I, on the other hand, am very curious, but when you get into cross, had you had interactions with Attorney Nestor prior to this trial, either in this case or other cases?
Yeah, so right off the top, she says, we've never met, and my name's Kathy Nestor, and yada, yada, yada. And I knew that wasn't true, so I didn't know whether to correct her or not. I decided to let her have that one because I had plenty of other things to check her on. But I did meet Kathy and Wendy outside of that courtroom when they first got onto the case, when it went from RQN to them, Ray Quinney and Nebuchadnezzar, to them. I introduced myself. I didn't have to introduce myself to Alex Ramos because I worked for him. So I knew who Alex was. We said, hey, and I've worked with the defense's investigator on other homicide cases. And so I didn't need an introduction with him. I introduced myself to Kathy and Wendy. And so I did know about their reputations, which was good in the state of Utah. They're both Rule 8 qualified lawyers.
Very experienced attorneys.
Yeah. I was surprised at the under preparation for my testimony. And overall, I would say that was the difference between me and Kathy. I was more prepared than she was. It's not that we were
It
one
seemed
person was
that
better
way.
than the other, but I just think I was prepared.
I could not tell if she was trying to catch you in maybe agreeing with her on something that she could spin back around, or if she was just getting confused. But as I looked at it in context of the whole trial, it happened so many times with different witnesses where it was just even asking the witness, Allie Staking, oh, you were at this trip in Costa Rica. And she's like, no, it was Hawaii. It was just little things like that where I don't think she was trying to trip up the witness. I think she had it confused
Yes.
in her memory. And so when I was looking at y'all's testimony, I was like, if this is a strategy, you change it immediately because you're not the witness who's going to be tripped up on a detail. And when it seemed to me, and I would love to know, but it seemed to me that when you thought that you were right on something and that she was wrong, you said, well, there's video for that, or there's a report for that for this exact reason, which seemed like you were signaling to her, I am correct and you are not. Go pull the report.
Well, it wasn't even about correct or not. It was like, if I don't remember, the reason that I make videos is so that I can go back and see it. And it is true that over time, you can see the same thing very differently. This is a very pronounced feature in all of my investigations. Cold case work is particularly like this. It's usually a fact that was looked at, but was overlooked for its particular significance at that time. A classic example of this is someone back in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, they could have been convicted based upon blood typing. Yet that exact same blood comes back with an innocence project or something 15 years later for DNA results, and it proves they weren't there and didn't do it. Exact same piece of evidence, different perspective on that exact same piece of evidence. So that's why I make the videos. I make the videos for obvious reasons. And I think the one that bugged me a little bit was the little safe, this wall safe that was laying on the floor of the closet. When it got opened, by the way, there's no evidence from this safe that's introduced at this trial. There's nothing relevant about this safe. Zero.
Right.
But she claims that I found a powdery residue. That's not correct. I reported in my written report, which she must have read, and I reported on the video, which she says she watched, that it was a glue residue. I could see that there was a splotch. I pull out the felt bottom and I pull that away, and it was the glue residue that they glued the felt down with on that safe. And it comes off in kind of flakes. And I can see that on my finger in the video. That's what she suggests is a powdery residue. Anybody thinks that I'm touching a powdery residue coming out of that house without gloves, you're crazy. You're nuts. I'm not going to do it. But that's not what was in there. So for her to make that claim, I just thought it was not true. It's just not true.
No, she did that a couple times. And with your laptop, like, no, that's not, I'm not taking this computer out of the house. It's my computer that I brought into the house.
The C&E computer was a tower computer, a desk computer. You put that under the desk and attach a monitor to it. Like, she didn't know that the C&E computer was a tower, not a laptop. That's just not prepared.
No, it was baffling. And I was going to ask about the safe, but just so we're clear before we move on to the other areas of cross, that's not the safe that Amy was talking about in the bond hearing and that witnesses were talking about that Kouri was trying to get a locksmith to get into. We're talking about a smaller safe from the closet, not the safe that was the subject of the confrontation and subsequent charges for Kouri that didn't come up at trial, but regarding the confrontation with Amy, that's the larger safe.
The safe that you are referring to is a gun safe, very large, cannot be moved. It's out. It was out in the office, the separate building, and it holds rifles and lots of guns, and so there's no picking that up and taking it to a locksmith. In fact, Kouri's the one who called the locksmith to break into it. So there was a lot of items in that safe that were not present upon my examination. And so I think that she was very interested in getting in there for reasons other than guns or vital documents.
Yeah, it was my understanding that there was a lot of cash in that safe at one point.
And that's
my
understanding.
From the pretrial motions that we saw, that there was a lot of cash in that safe at one point. But that's part of the
and if it's money, Kouri wants it.
We definitely saw that. So I think we'll hear more about the safe and that incident when we get to sentencing, which we'll talk about as we get into your impression of the verdict and the verdict coming in. But it's interesting that Nestor's like, we've never met before. And you're like, well, in fact, we have met before. I'm still buffering on that a little bit, that she would represent you hadn't met before and that you had talked in this case. And I have questions about Ramos. I haven't let that go. We're going to come back to that. But she asked you very narrow questions about Mexico. Yeah. And I believe asked you did not call or travel to Mexico as part of your investigation and stopped there.
Right.
Is there a reason you think that she stopped with such narrow questions?
Oh, most definitely. Because she had my reports on my investigation of the hunting partner in Nevada and that traveled with him to Mexico. Dude lives in Nevada. The outfitter company that Eric and his hunting partner used are in Arizona. I most definitely investigated those two entities in my attempt to discover if it was possible that Eric had acquired drugs while in Sonora, Mexico. And
so the parties are located in the U.S. and they traveled to Mexico to go hunting, which is why you wouldn't have called Mexico. And she knows this because she has your report.
Correct. She knows that I didn't call Mexico. She knows I didn't travel to Mexico. That would not be a fruitful investigation, primarily because I got the answers I needed out of, not the answers I wanted, the answers that satisfy the requirements of properly investigating this particular hypothesis. Remember that it's Eric accidentally overdosing.
Right.
The defense says in closing that I said it had to be a suicide, but that's not true. My testimony was that...
Well, that's not what you said. That is what they said.
The testimony was that one of the hypotheses was that he could have accidentally overdosed and self-administered. Well, there are different permutations of that, right? Small corrections you could make to that. Maybe Kouri helped him by getting these pills and then assisted him by drinking these things, or something like that. So you've got to allow for some permutations to those theories. They're not just etched in stone. So the Mexico thing, like, I don't know, people who haven't been hunting or camping probably don't get this fully. But when you are hunting or camping with someone, fishing, you are close. They're
very.
You know everything your buddy is doing, okay? There's no, the bathroom time, the coffee, you know everything that's going on. Nothing is going to escape you like a drug deal for fentanyl. And there is no indication from the outfitter, from the guides, from Eric's hunting partner, who, by the way, was the last person outside of that house to speak to Eric Richins while he was alive. I was keenly interested in talking to his hunting partner because they had troubles getting their trophies back across the border, and he was cursing with his hunting partner at the outfitter who wasn't giving them their trophies. So that was the last.
The way it came in trial, it seemed as if he was upset with the outfitter and talking to the outfitter, not talking to his friend about what these dudes are doing. So he's talking to the friend about what they're doing because he's frustrated that they're not getting stuff back. And we saw the videos from inside Eric's house. There are hunting trophies in the home. This was a regular part of his life that I think Kouri would have well known when they got married. But the hunting partner, it's interesting that we didn't hear from him. I think if the defense really wanted to make much of that, this is a witness they could have easily called and chose not to. Because for the prosecution's like, Kouri killed him. We don't need to tell you who he was talking to that night. It doesn't matter. The defense was trying to make much of it and then didn't call the friend. That's wild. But of course, you're going to track it down because the hunting friend would be like, no, there was never a gap in time when we weren't together unless somebody was literally in the restroom. And even then you could hear that they were in there. Like it's, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, so, just in terms of that part of the hypothesis testing system, I'm interested in a little bit more rigor about not trying to track down whether or not there were specific drug transactions. I'm also looking at his behavior. Is this someone, is his daily schedule, his daily routine, is that consistent with someone who is an illicit drug user? And the answer is quite obviously no. His daily pattern was up before the crack of dawn, go, 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 Energizer Bunny all the way up until the evening hours, and then into bed, rinse and repeat, do it all over again. This was not a man who exhibited behaviors that were consistent with any kind of opioid addiction. It just didn't make any sense. And really, I didn't think that was going to be such a bone of contention because, remember, Kouri says right up front, no, he doesn't use drugs. He doesn't take drugs. They keep asking her. She says, no, 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 no. And the only times that I'm aware that she starts to do this is when she is telling Gene, Eric's father, that it was COVID and what killed his wife, which is a horrific thing to say. And then she tells him, yeah, he had a pill problem. Kouri was very transactional. Doesn't make any sense. She was very transactional. She only allowed the boys to see their grandfather when he gave her something. And she did not allow the boys to see the rest of Eric's family. I think that she was perfectly willing to allow that to happen only if they gave up all of Eric's money to her. And so to use your children as objects, I think it's behavior that is consistent with a psychological diagnosis, which, is one that we all know.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me always when you see kids used and leveraged in that way. And I had forgotten about how much of that we heard in the bond hearing until I went back now after trial to look at it and saw Amy talking about the fact that they were kept out of the charity golf tournament for his birthday that's going to align with the sentencing day, which is wild to me. And that Kouri was asking for money in lieu of cards, but to a new bank account for her, things that I had just completely forgotten about because they didn't, as you said earlier, have that grounding that we see after trial. And of course, you were there alongside while this was going on in the year prior to her being arrested, investigating this case as she sued the estate. And I'm still just wondering what that I will never have access to, but what those conversations are like after you testified on the recorded jail calls with Kouri and her family, because it seems that she talks quite a lot based on the pretrial motions about the fact that she brought you into this case. You wouldn't have been into this case if she hadn't sued. She must have realized at some point that she caused this to herself, but investigating Mexico.
I think that's a point worth emphasizing. Kouri Richins convicted herself through her words, through her conduct. You got text messages that she had erased or obscured by means of a software VoIP on her phone, right? All of those text messages come in from Grossman because when I was talking with him, I remember feeling the joyous relief that these iPhones were non-operational. He couldn't erase anything on them because he couldn't get them to turn on. I was like, thank you. Kouri erased messages on her phone and that was detected. Kouri's conduct is what convicted her, not a private investigator, not anybody else. her statements, her conduct, what she did, that's what convicted her. That's how this jury found her guilty. Not anything I did or the police did. What we did was preserve the record for that to be heard. I was integral to this case at a certain segment of time. While the police got their act together and figured this out, I told them to get Carmen Lauber in May of 2022, and it wasn't until April of 23 that they did that. I don't pass judgment on that. I just say, look, it wasn't that difficult to figure out. This was not a master criminal making out to be something she was not. She was a good pretender, that's to be sure. And she certainly extended herself in such a way that she was indeed a queenly pretender. But that's all she was. Everything underneath the hood was rotten. The money, the business, the relationship, everything about it. It was all just surface.
Fake. Even the book. And Bloodworth pointed it out in closing. He said she didn't even write the book. And in one of the juror interviews, we heard the juror saying, like, if that was an authentic experience, if you really were trying to help your children through grief, why do you need, I get an editor, but why do you need a ghostwriter to pretend what those emotions would be? And that's me paraphrasing from that juror, but it struck her, if you're writing a book about your own experience, why do you need a ghostwriter? And I think it's because Kouri's experience wasn't authentically grieving because she was relieved. That was my read on it. But
yeah, I've worked with a lot of psychopaths in my career. I've worked in representing them, and I've worked in seeing that they were properly held to account for their actions. The idea that Kouri did not have the ability to understand the emotional state of other people is not surprising to me. That she cannot properly categorize and interpret other people's emotions is a classic sign. And I think using your children as weapons, objects to be bartered, is a sign. I think the extreme narcissism is most definitely a sign. And I understand that may be an objectionable term while we're in court, but I'm on EDB as far as I know. I think we can just tell the truth.
Though EDB does have some rules. I know we do. Well, you have a work experience that you're bringing with you. We do try to rein in people from diagnosing and name calling, but we are fine.
Well, I'm just looking at the behaviors that are consistent with that of a psychopath. And I see a lot of behaviors to me that signal to me that she is fundamentally unable to emote. I will offer the steak dinner challenge right now. I'm throwing down the steak dinner gauntlet. If somebody can find me a frame of video, authentic video, of Kouri Richins crying with a tear coming out of her eye, that's the steak dinner for the first person that can find that. I don't believe it exists. I've looked for it.
We've got a tissue during the bond hearing.
Yeah, she's got a tissue during the bond hearing, but no tears. She's dabbing at her cheeks, but it's not real.
It's the same with the video.
The video at the scene. It's this.
Yep.
Until she hears about the medical examiner, that's when this happens, right?
It's very interesting to me that she didn't necessarily expect that there would be an autopsy, but I think the prosecution did a good job of highlighting what Kouri was pretending at versus what Katie authentically felt. It's a stark contrast. And I know we didn't finish talking about cross-examination because we are deep into our conversation, but there were a few things on cross I did want to ask about. The Mexico investigation, of course, is interesting that you were able to track down and talk to those involved in those hunting trips. And then you had Eric Richins' phone information. You were able to see his activity data, but you were able to talk to everyone in his life about him, coaching his kids' sports, which we heard about at the bond hearing, about how involved he was, and find that his pattern of life did not match a pattern of somebody who was deep in an addiction, as the defense was trying to insinuate. But his pattern of texting also didn't insinuate that he and Bryce were in a relationship. Were you stunned that this came up on cross? I was shocked. I was shocked that they were trying to make more of those text messages. And it seemed like you were genuinely confused as to what she was even asking about with the sexting of it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can understand why she would misinterpret this conversation. What I can't say in the witness stand is hearsay, right? I can't spout hearsay.
Right.
If somebody told me that Eric had discovered that Kouri was going through his phone, and that she would come upon these texts, which occurred in 2018, by the way, a long time before the events in this case, and that he and Bryce both knew that she was going through his phone, would it make a little more sense now to you why these guys would be sending these explicit remarks back and forth?
Oh, so
it was a gotcha. It was a gotcha joke. Like, it's clear at the very first message, which Nestor doesn't read. She doesn't read the whole sentence, right? I'm the one who reads it from the witness stand. And it totally changes the character of what that thing says. It says, I told her I'm bringing you home.
Right. Which it was that clearly seemed like a joke. And I've watched other high profile trials where defense attorneys have tried to have this gotcha moment. Yeah. And then you hear the whole text and it just falls so flat. And them trying to make a lot of those texts felt really gross to me on this side of the screen watching it, because you could see where they were going, but they weren't reading in the text. And if Eric was having this torrid, solicit affair and it was all in text, she would be reading those text after text after text and asking someone to answer for them. And she never did. Did you see or pick up what the jury was doing while this uncomfortable exchange was unfolding? Because I think your response was appropriate, and I believe they would probably be sitting there aghast.
I noted a couple of them were kind of smiling, and I thought a couple of them were trying to suppress a laugh themselves. I think men more so than women probably understand this kind of talk between men. These are two junior high school friends who somehow never grew out of junior high school in their jokes with each other. And that's all it was. I think it is exceedingly important when you're going to blame a victim, when you're going to go after the victim in a case, you better have a kill shot. You better have something that is solid. Yeah. Because if you falter, I think that it hurt their credibility. I thought it hurt the defense lawyers' credibility in this case. I think as I went back and looked at the rest of the trial, I think it was probably suffering when they got to this point, but this point really, really hurt them. And it was self-inflicted. It wasn't anything I did.
Oh, 100% self-inflicted. But it was a moment for me when I sat there, because we had heard insinuation about whether or not Eric was having an affair. And as they got to those questions, I'm like, has this all been about text with Bryce, where he and Bryce are I call it making butt, but they're butting heads with one another for banter. And it sounds like even more so that they knew Kouri was looking at the phone and were doing it to kind of say, see if you bring it up. Like, are you going to bring it up? Are you going to bring up what you read on the phone or whatever?
Yeah. I have no way of knowing for sure that that's what was going on, but I strongly suspect it.
And that would make sense, because it seems like that's around the time that Kouri is talking. I mean, she's talking to Grossman throughout this time and then bringing him to Utah in 2020. So yeah, if I thought somebody was going through my phone, I might put some stuff in there to be like, what? Go ahead and ask me about it. Go ahead and ask me about it then.
Right, yeah.
I mean, in my household, it's my secret Audible account, which the law needs to know well about. There's the books that can't pop up on the Audible that my kids are listening to, that my husband and I joke about. But
understood.
Exactly. So it just makes so much sense. And again, you got a sense for Eric. through all of those who loved them in a way that you can't always bring forward at trial.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to distill 936.3 hours of billable hours into 90 minutes of testimony when I'm not the one in charge. It's a daunting task. It really is. There's another thing that was hearsay, but I think it's important. Remember the talk about Carmen and sort of the weight that I assigned her based upon the phone contacts with Kouri. It's also important to know that Carmen was close. Carmen liked Eric. Carmen was close to him and the boys. And when Carmen was a no-show at the funeral, her absence was conspicuous. And I considered that possible evidence of consciousness of guilt.
Right.
That did not come up, but that was an important cue for me to go to the police and say, hundreds and hundreds of messages. Kouri can't remember the name of her new house cleaner because she's brand new, because Norma replaced Carmen.
But Carmen had been there up through Eric passing.
I don't know.
Right close in time.
I think it was shortly before, is my recollection. Mm-hmm. You probably know this moment, which as a professional, you can look up on a public website, sort of somebody's criminal record history. And I looked at Carmen's and I kind of went like, oh, hey, there's so many docket entries for her. It was multiple pages, just listing the case number.
Right.
And I was like, well, we got hundreds of messages. She's conspicuously absent from the funeral, and she's got a record longer than both my arms. So
yeah,
go talk to her, because they're certainly in a more powerful position than I am to go talk with her. I never spoke to Carmen, never once. She was preserved for the state's witness, and she told them what she told them, and I had nothing to do with that. But it was pivotal. I don't think this
case
you watch Carmen's would have happened without her. I did.
Yeah. And I felt, and I mean, you and I have talked to a lot of people, you more than me as a prosecutor, because you have more access to people as you are on the defense side. But there was a genuine, for me, heaviness to her testimony of sorrow, deep sorrow and regret that came across in everything that she said.
Yeah, and I thought the defense's cross only made her more relatable and likable to the jury. I think the jury felt sorry for her. I've listened to some of the juror interviews, and I'm fascinated by that, because as a practitioner, you don't always get to know at the end of a case what the jury was thinking. Why did they do this? But it's been super interesting to watch. Like, that's been the most interesting part to me about the whole trial, is understanding another perspective, understanding what it's like to be in that box as someone who doesn't really know anything about the legal system. We can get jaded in our jobs, and I certainly have in mine, and nothing looks fresh to us at all. So it's super great to be able to watch those and see their reactions to various things.
It is. It really is. And it's interesting too to get, because when you're a defense investigator, you're sitting in the courtroom. When you're an expert, you can sit in the courtroom and watch testimony that you're negating, but to be excluded, and that's one of the things that's been hard for me to transition to covering cases in this way, is that I'm used to being able to at least text my colleague and be like, what's going on in your trial today? But to be kind of on the outside as an observer and not able to be up at the sidebars because it's not my case is a different experience. And it sounds like for you too in this one, where you can't watch till after and you're kind of on the outside in a different way. Yeah. But then you get to see the jurors.
Well, I mean, that's just so fantastic. I really enjoyed the interaction, even though I was in pain on the witness stand. I guess you probably tell, I liked being there. I wanted to be there. I enjoy, testifying. I like it. I like it. I think that
it's part of the job.
It is. It's part of the job, and it's super stressful and super intense, which I definitely like. I don't know. That's just what I feed on, I guess. Yeah, the ability to see from that side of the room, super interesting, because you never get that perspective, you know. It's like being on an island and you can drive up and down the roadway, but not until you get on a
Yeah,
boat and see it from the waterway do you see a whole different place, a whole different perspective. So I definitely enjoyed it. I thought, you know, I could have done without the pain, and the travel pain was something severe, but
absolutely.
it all came together, and I was glad that it did.
Your testimony was illuminating, and I know you've downplayed kind of your involvement in this case, but the way you were able to highlight A, the things that Kouri did, and B, the things that you did brought a groundedness to this case. And then the way that the defense tried to find these little nothing moments and you were able to refute it, just I think put words into what I was feeling about how the defense questioning was going this whole trial. I wonder if the jury felt the same way. Like, that's what we keep saying. We don't agree with that insinuation.
Yeah.
And for me, the moment that the defense was asking you about these texts with him and Bryce, I went, wait a second. Are these the texts they've been referring to the whole time about everything, talking about some affair? And it just threw that whole thing out the window for me.
Yeah.
When we talk about the jurors and you getting to watch the jurors, though, they've had some lovely compliments for you. So I imagine that's been nice to see that they were also, because you never know how they're going to take testimony when you're giving it back to an attorney, which I think was warranted. But it must have been nice to see that they understood what your role was and your testimony.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to be understood, right? That's what human beings do. We seek to be understood. This is our nature. But I try and operate without regard to what other people are going to think about me. I have most definitely lost my give a shit about what other people think of me or judge me for. Like, it doesn't matter that much. But in a courtroom setting with a jury, it's quite a bit different, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was happy that happened. There's one more thing that I wanted to touch on about the cross, the GPS tracking.
I was just going to ask about that because I was going to say, when people misunderstand, I think the thing they misunderstood the most was the GPS tracking. I love that you're just anticipating where I wanted to go with my next question.
Well, yeah, our minds are thinking alike should concern you a lot more than it should concern me, just to be fair. So the question that wasn't asked of me was why? Why did you track these people? I was bursting with that answer, and nobody asked me the question. So,
well, perfect. Now we're here, so we get to explain why. And just for those that are like, what moment and cross are we talking about? You had GPS tracked cars that you thought might belong to Carmen and then determined didn't belong to Carmen. So those were terminated. Those didn't belong to her. No big deal. But you were also tracking Kouri, and you were tracking vehicles connected to Kouri's mother, one of which she was letting Kouri's brother Ronnie use. And the audience might be familiar with mom and brother because they were recently on 2020, which we'll get to. But you were tracking a number of vehicles, and you're allowed to do so through the state of Utah, through being a PI. There are rules to go about and get approval for that. And then you did. At what period of time was this? And then why? Because I don't think she ever asked what period of time you were tracking. It was obviously before the arrest because it was Kouri, but do you recall what period of time this was happening?
Yeah, it would have been in the summer of 22.
Okay.
Started in May. And as I said on the stand, there are different times for different vehicles. I don't think it will surprise you that I was interested in Kouri's travel most significantly. But the reason, and of course, Lisa, her mom, was at the residence on March the 3rd, the last day that Eric Richins was alive. So I had an interest in her. There are other reasons I was interested in Lisa and her role in this. But my situation was that I understood that Eric had died of a massive ingestion of fentanyl. It was more than massive. It was just colossal.
Right.
The amount of fentanyl found in his gastric contents just kills the entire neighborhood of people easily. Uh, there was ostensibly, and by all reports, only one adult present in that house when that time of ingestion makes sense. Yeah,
Yes. Agreed.
Cody, Eric's business partner, and other people could have benefited from Eric's death, which is just a
Wild.
yeah, crazy. But nobody was there. No adult was there except Kouri. I had reason to fear for the safety of Eric's 3 young sons. I had reason to fear that Kouri would abscond with those boys.
Right.
I had every.
That's a very realistic concern.
It was a very realistic situation. I think I would have been grossly negligent had I not tracked her vehicle and those other vehicles at the time that I did, because I was a Lone Ranger out there. The police were not moving on this case. I was it. There was no cavalry coming and there was no backup available. I needed to be able to know where her patterns and habits were. If that could provide me with additional leads, great. If that could provide me with locations of additional evidence, also great. If that could provide me with associates or other locations, also very good. So you don't take this decision to track just willy-nilly. This is not something that you do in every case. This was as serious as it gets. And so you're damn right I tracked him.
Now, we heard in trial questions about whether or not there were ostensibly go bags with Kouri's passport and travel documents and go bags for the boys.
Yes.
Were you aware of those being at the house?
Oh, yes.
And is that part of what caused you so much concern, that she had bags packed with travel dogs?
That's definitely part of the ingredients in the soup. Those go bags were there. We knew about them. And we're very concerned. Very concerned. And also there were reports that Kouri was showing up at the kids' games with a noticeable odor of alcohol. She was driving her vehicle with alcohol on board.
That's concerning.
This not unusual for people to self-medicate with alcohol in a time of grief, but she was probably in a time of regret, perhaps, and she was using alcohol. And we were very concerned about the safety of the boys. Nothing else in this case really matters but their safety. In the end,
absolutely.
In the final analysis, that's all that really matters.
Family law is such a difficult area because there is truly no telling what people might do when they are faced with having to navigate custody and access and children, but also money and the house and the estate. And there were numerous, and I'm characterizing this, I'm not going to ask you because these are your clients, but just from looking at the litigation, it seemed that these were contentious lawsuits. And we heard in the bond hearing, Amy talking about Kouri withholding the children. We've heard you talk about Kouri withholding the children unless she was getting what she wanted. It's from the outside reasonable to believe, as that litigation went on, if she wasn't getting what she wanted, that there is room for concern about her leaving the country to get what she wants, among other options. And especially when you're looking from the perspective of the family, believing from the earliest hours of this case that Kouri did this to Eric, and with background there as well, I'm not surprised that they were concerned and wanting to track her, and that it got approved for you to track her and her mom, who was there. We didn't even see when mom got called on the body cam, but lickety split, she was at that house. And I noticed in the body cam, she was starting to offer information to the police that Kouri wasn't giving. Oh, but didn't Eric have chest pain? Wasn't Eric doing this? It was mom that was saying those things before we ever saw Kouri saying them to law enforcement. So
this seems like an appropriate place for me to kind of insert a little thing about confirmation bias. The difference between an amateur sleuth and a professional investigator is that the professional understands their own bias. I have a bias. I've lost a brother. That will give me grief until the day I die? Do I have gender bias? Do I have a race bias? Do I have other biases that I bring to the table? I evaluate those. I account for those as best I can. And I account for the grief that I know that this family is going through. My job is to confirm what they're saying in some kind of objective way so that we can eliminate the effect of confirmation bias. I think that the defense makes the argument in their closing argument that this was a case of confirmation bias, but there's no evidence of that. Yeah. There's zero evidence that they got into this case that there was confirmation bias in this case. And had they asked me about it, they certainly could have asked me this. I would have given them an answer that I've just given you.
You would have given them an answer that they didn't want because it makes it look like there's no confirmation bias. They wanted, it felt to me that there were moments, and I watched the Karen Reed cases out of Massachusetts twice. There were moments in the defense closing that were taken from that closing, whether consciously or not, that seemed very inspired by, and the confirmation bias was one of them. But in that case, it was accurate. There was a rush to a decision without any external evidence. There was the opposite of a rush to prosecute in this case. There was a delay in prosecution, and there's no argument that they immediately looked at what Amy or Katie had to say and went, oh, it must be Kouri. Yeah. In fact, I think they looked at the grief and said, this could just be a heart attack or a natural cause, and we need to wait until we know more, is what it seemed law enforcement did.
And then they got to Carmen Lauber, and they immediately go to verify her story with the phone stuff and with carrier records. And like, you know, props to their expert. I've seen that guy grow into a really well-honed professional. I thought that presentation of the cell phone stuff was really smart, very clean looking.
I agree.
I just thought it was easy to follow, easy to understand. He's really done well for himself, I think, in this case. And that, I think, to tie back over to the jurors conversation, that's really critical for them to believe Carmen Lauber. Because if you don't believe Carmen Lauber, you're probably going to acquit in this case.
And I think even if you think that Carmen is downplaying aspects of her involvement, the tech evidence shows that they were meeting and transacting narcotics. And though we did not see the undercover presentation, both jurors commented on how helpful that was, that I have seen interviews with, in addition to how helpful you were. But yeah, Mr. Kostradimos's presentation was so clearly laid out. And when you talked about the volume of conversations with Carmen Lauber, we got just a small snippet of it in that presentation of how much traffic there was between the two of them. Yeah. So I'm not surprised in 2022, you were looking at Kouri's phone records going, who is this? Why are you talking so much? Eric has a ton of fentanyl in his system. The first question is, where did it come from? And then I think, how did it get into his system? Because Kouri doesn't have just fentanyl laying around the house, clearly. So,
well, and let me just say that the defense, the defense war cry, there's no fentanyl found in the house, is a terrible idea. It's very bad. It's what gave me the strongest suspicion that it had been Kouri that did this, because she was the only one who could have manipulated the crime scene to clean up so that there would be no trace of fentanyl in the house. I couldn't believe that the defense was still making this argument. At the end of this case, they never found any fentanyl. Well, guess why? She manipulated it out of that scene so that you couldn't find it. Duh.
Yeah, it was wild to me. And
it's not a great defense.
Again, it doesn't track with the behavior. It doesn't track with Eric's life. It doesn't track with what those around him said. And we didn't see all of that. But we got a sense for it in Kouri's own recorded calls with like the medical examiner.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that she recorded that call. It was such strong evidence against her.
Yeah. Again, another example, Kouri Darden. I'm going to try and strip that last name for her because I thought she took that name from her husband and then she took everything from him. Everything. I don't think she deserves that
Yeah.
name. That's just my personal opinion. Anyway, Kouri convicts herself. She makes these recordings. She writes these letters, the walk the dog letter. This is just damaging. Some jurors thought it was more damaging than others, but nobody thought it was helpful.
That's very true.
It did not help her. And that, once again, Kouri Darden's words convict Kouri. It's not me. I'm not setting anybody up. I'm not planting any evidence. Kouri's words, Kouri's deeds, that's what got her here.
Yeah. Speaking of that, when did you find out that Josh Grossman's phones were repaired and that texts were recovered from them in your investigation of this case? It would have been after Kouri was arrested, obviously, but how did that all go down?
So he contacted my clients and he was immediately referred to me, and I spoke with him that same day that he had made contact. What I knew was that he was contacting me because he felt guilt with regards to the relationship that had now long since soured.
Shocking.
What I needed to determine was whether that was all. I needed to know whether he felt guilty because he took part or had knowledge of this homicide. And so talking with Josh Grossman is never less than a 90-minute affair, guaranteed. It's a long conversation. At some point, I do say to Josh, well, I'm convinced she murdered him. Tell me what you think about that. This is where the rubber meets the road on that admonition the judge keeps giving the jury. I'm not offering it for the truth. I want to see the effect upon the listener. I want to hear
what do you do with that info?
Right. I want to hear what he says to me right after I drop that on him. That's an important investigative technique. And I want to see his reaction to that because it's going to tell me whether or not he feels guilt about the homicide, not just the guilt about the affair. And his answers are consistent with what I finally conclude is that he did not have prior knowledge. I don't think, at least as far as I can tell. He did have some suspect conversations with her after that, which the jury heard about. And
they did.
Her choice of words, again, it's her words, poisoning, murder.
Yeah.
These are not words that a grieving widow uses. Sorry, they're not.
Not unless they're talking about what somebody else did, not about themselves. But I think what's important to highlight about Grossman is that he reached out to Eric's family, it sounds like out of guilt for the affair, after Kouri was arrested, though.
No, there was one contact just prior, and then there was additional contact that I had with him after her arrest.
Okay.
And I, in the very first one, I determined that those phones were non-functional. And your question was, when did I learn that they'd been recovered? Not until much after they were, because that was a process that I had recommended to them or whatever, that I handed Grossman off to the sheriff's office, and they were in charge of collecting the devices. I never did any of that. I just handed him off to the sheriff's office, and they took control of that. But I've certainly repaired a lot of broken iPhones in my day. And we're very grateful for those because A, they're intact, and B, they're tamper-proof. Nobody can be deleting stuff like Kouri did. You can't be tampering with that. We're using different techniques to get those off of the phone than is traditional. So
there was contact with the Richins prior to her being arrested. Was it the book that was the trigger then? Because in his testimony, he conflated the two.
Yeah. I think it probably was. I mean, I could look up the exact dates, but one was definitely before and her arrest and after. And I think that's also what prompted my comment to him that she murdered him because she'd been arrested for murder.
Right. That's really what I was getting at was the comment. it's not giving him new
It's
information
not.
if it's after she's been arrested for
Right.
murder, because the only thing that was charged later was the attempt. And I wonder how much getting Grossman's phones helped them charge the attempt, knowing that she's with him,
Yeah.
because it seemed to me on the outside she was using Grossman in that day as an alibi that she could set up to fall, because she didn't really care all that much what happened to him. He was convenient.
I thought her conduct on that day spoke loud volumes about what was going on. And that just her non-reaction, her non-travel back home, I thought that was all very suspect. And consider that this is her getting better at doing this. She understands that you can no longer just spread it on a sandwich that is not guaranteed to deliver the full dosage, because he likely took a bite or two, had this reaction in his mouth, and went for the EpiPen and some Benadryl. When you solubilize it and throw it back, as in a shot, or put it in a squirt bottle like you have on a bicycle, for example, that once you realize it tastes bad, it's too late. It's already in your stomach. It's too late. And
with lemon drop or ginger beer, you've got some strong flavors that are in there.
It's going to mask
competing.
It's
there's
going to mask the flavor. But even if you know that it tastes terrible, it's too late. You can't do anything about that. That's a soluble liquid.
Absolutely.
Even if you force vomiting in that situation, you're still going to have a lot of absorption through the stomach lining. When I learned the amount of fentanyl in his blood, I was concerned about that massive dosage. It suggested to me that someone had tried and failed before. And that's when I went back to the Valentine's Day to investigate that more thoroughly, because I thought that could bring better understanding for me into the situation of the actual homicide. Then the gastric contents come back, and I'm like, whoa, this is 20,000 nanograms per liter. It is such a massive overdose. The only excuse for it, the only reasonable explanation, is that someone had tried before and failed. And this time they were going to make sure. That's what it said.
Yeah, and I think we saw that in closing, with Bloodworth saying she didn't just want him dead, she wanted him good and dead. And then it seems, because she kept pinning it to 9 p.m. when they had drinks in her reports, and then saying that she was around the house and whatever, but she waited until 3 o'clock to call law enforcement. And even then there's that window of her moving around on her phone. And I think with the putting off 911 about doing CPR and everything, it also tracks with that statement from the prosecutor that she was waiting long enough to make sure there was no medical viability, is what it seemed to me.
Yeah, I've had a practice that I established 25 or 30 years ago of, when I'm finished with a case, that is when the state and defense have rested, or both sides have rested. The evidence is in. I've done my job. I'm out of there. I don't watch closing arguments. That's not a thing I've ever done. It's part of divesting myself of the case and kind of scraping it off me a little bit, and getting closed out on that and going on to the next thing. But I sure am glad that I watched this closing argument, because damn.
Yeah, it was a great closing. What changed your mind on this one? Was it that you didn't have to be in the courtroom to watch it? Did that help a little bit?
That was very much a part of it, for sure. I'd already returned to my home, which is now in Hawaii, and that's where I'm recuperating and recovering. I was on my couch with a cold ice pack on my neck, and I watched it from that position. Yeah, that's a much more comfortable place to be than in that packed courtroom, with the tension in that room at that moment. I wasn't there, but I know it. I know that tension. I've waited for juries to come back before, and the closings were just fantastical. One in its undersold way, and the other in its accuracy. I don't I hadn't had any dealings with Brad Bloodworth prior to this case, and I only spoke with him briefly on a handful of occasions. But he's just like you would imagine him in person, as you see in the courtroom. He is calm and measured, and I knew he was cool when I walked in and he's got his dog in the office. Anybody who brings their dog to the office, you get, yeah,
I
thumbs
love
up for me.
that. I will be excoriated if I do not ask for follow-up. Do we know what kind of dog, and do we know the pupper's name by any chance?
I should know the name. I was told it a number of times, but I can't recall it at this moment.
That's all right.
And he's an interesting dog. I'm not sure I could do any justice to the accuracy of the breed. He's a medium-sized dog, black on top with white socks.
Lovely.
There could be some collie and some lab in there, something like that.
But just a great dog in the office, which I had, as I devolve into a story, but I had a wonderful supervisor who would bring his dogs into the office, and he had an Irish Wolfhound that was standing up as big as me. It was the best dog ever, and those were the best days in the office. I loved it when people had their dogs in the office because, again, it's a very stressful job, and the grounding of having animals in the office was lovely. So and I think Brad Bloodworth had to do a lot to stand kind of in the center of the hurricane that is the defense case in this case, because the defense did a lot of swirling around. And as the prosecutor, you can either get caught in the swirl and then you're also splattering stuff on the walls, or you stand in the eye of the hurricane and say, I'm trying my case no matter what they do, and we'll see how it is at the end. And he stood his ground.
I think I remarked, and I'll tell you that I'm not sure I've seen a more stark contrast between a prosecutor and a defense table. Like the prosecution in this case, it just seemed to me to be steady on, steady on, steady on, steady on, and his style and demeanor definitely contribute to that. And I thought the defense was characterized by histrionics and the genuflections, the throwing of the arms in the air and the outrage and that kind of thing. And I mean, I think Ramos had that early on, and then he geared down quite a bit.
He ramped it down real fast. I'm not going to say that we had any part in that because I have never seen a cross-examination like that. But I liked Ramos in pretrial litigation. He talked a lot about the technology, which I'm naturally gravitating towards because it's so grounded. Like, what does the text say? What doesn't it say? So when he got up with that first cross-examination, I was flabbergasted. And I have never seen anything quite like it because the officer on the stand was like, I was just doing the death investigation. And Ramos is like, but you didn't do this. And I was stunned. And then his next cross was substantially better. He iterated much better. But you have worked together with Ramos. I liked his style, like his courtroom attire style. I liked his comportment in pretrial motions. I liked his subsequent cross-examinations. That first one was wild. I wonder if he got caught in the hurricane a little.
Oh, yeah, probably. I mean, as tidy as that courtroom was run by Judge M, I think that there is still a lot of stress in there. There's a lot of energy in that courtroom. And I think when you're sitting at a defense table, you can get revved up at the start, but settle into it. And I think he did. And I've previously provided Ramos consulting services on forensics, computer forensics for various clients. And I was surprised at that first cross-examination. He's a thoughtful, measured, very talented lawyer. And I think that his iterations, as you say, probably speak to that. He learns, adapts, changes, and that's a good lawyer. Somebody who's just set in their ways and unable to think outside the box, I think, is probably not going to go very far. But he's a good lawyer, a smart lawyer, and he's the least experienced lawyer at that defense table. So I'm not surprised that he didn't have a more how do you say it on this channel? Embiggened role? Is that how, did I get that right?
We love the word embiggened. Yes, we do. But yes, he didn't have, it did seem that he was there to help with the technical sides of the evidence, but also it was clear that Netzer and Lewis were lead counsel. I know he's at a separate firm. After the first cross, I was like, this feels more like a production of Chicago than it does a trial. And then he definitely iterated. I was like, oh, I like this much better because he has good questions and I enjoyed his crosses, but I gave him on my end no end of commentary on that first cross because it was just wild. But it's nice to hear that also, as we saw in the pretrial motions, he's a smart attorney, and it was nice to see him iterate. And I think we saw that in his argument to the court. You saw that his comportment in front of the jury versus his argument to the court was very tuned in to what the court needed from his arguments, the arguments he needed to make, and then the points that were not going to go very far. And you could tell that he was reading the room in those moments with the arguments to the court.
Yeah. Oh God, let me just add here. It's not my place. It's way above my pay grade to comment on judges. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but really all you ever want in a judge is for them to show up prepared, reading all of the materials, come with at least the ability to open their minds, if not an open mind, about what the parties have to say in excess of what has been filed, and then to fairly judge. That's it. That's all you can ever request of a judge in my book. I've seen plenty of judges who fall down on any of those requirements or all of them. I've seen plenty of those, but that just wasn't happening here. This guy shows up prepared. He shows up ready to roll. He wants from the parties only what he needs to get to a decision that everybody needs. I saw all the online admiration for him, and
my effusive fangirling. I mean, I've watched a lot of judges, and the ones that I am a fan of, I am a big fan of. And I think in my career, I have run into judges that have been tremendous. And I know how draining it is when you are running into judges that are not tremendous and that do not know what the law covering the thing you're arguing is, have not read your motions.
It makes everything tougher on the litigants, but it also does a disservice to the respect for the judiciary. And as an old federal judge friend of mine once said to me, he said, if we don't have the confidence of the people we're adjudicating these cases for, nothing works. None of it works. We don't have an army and we don't tax people. All we have is the ability to sell these decisions to a public. And fairness, the appearance of fairness, so important for the credibility of the court.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of judges out there that do that, and unfortunately, there's a bunch that don't.
And the ones that don't do so much harm. It takes more judges that are good to undo where judges who are not great cause harm. But Judge M, I think, 100%. Yeah. I think Judge M gave. I mean, we just finished watching the Afro Man trial, so the law nerds are overdone with wild law enforcement and a judge who is just, I don't even know. He'll try to come to Tennessee and arrest me, I think.
That was pretty
wild.
Tough. Yeah.
But Judge M seemed to have incredibly prepared, very clearly smart, very knowledgeable on the law, but also willing to say, let me take a look. And so many judges will not pause and say, you know what, let me look into this a little further. And also at times we saw him say, you know what, I'm going to modify what I just did, which takes a very confident and smart judge to say, you know what, I'm going to change my mind a little here and explain why. And it seemed that there was a lot of respect for him in the courtroom. And that courtroom is not huge, but Judge M, I mean, when the man stood up, he covered the seal from what we could see on the camera. He seems fairly tall as it is, but we're just watching. He covers the court seal as he stands up on the bench there, but he was great. He's one of the best bench officers that I've had the pleasure of watching a high profile trial with. And absolutely just adored him. It's nice to hear that in court, the demeanor is the same. And there was a little fuss between him and the media early on where he wanted, I think, to make sure that this case went forward with no circus, the media not influencing a jury and keeping the jurors safe. And it seemed that those were his focuses in getting this case to be fair to the defendant, fair to the prosecution, and most importantly, fair to the jurors and keeping the jurors safe and, unintruded upon by outside media or sources.
If you've done this for a while, you can imagine all of the things that could have gone sideways in this trial. Like it could have been so bad. There's so many opportunities to make a misstep in this process. And I think a lot of this job is just that, avoiding the missteps, just not stepping in it and trying to get across the finish line. Right?
Absolutely.
Nobody ever said winning had to be pretty.
Definitely. One of the things that you know better than I do is Summit County is not a county that gets a ton of homicide cases either.
Right. Yeah. I used to live in Summit County, in Park City, which is in Summit County. And Summit County is a small backside of the Wasatch community that is primarily a residential community. A lot of people commute from there to Salt Lake City and other places along the Wasatch Front. So Park City, Summit County is considered part of the Wasatch Back. They call it the Wasatch Back. And the Wasatch Back has Wasatch County, Summit County, other small rural counties. And there's not a lot of homicide in Summit County. I think when I lived there, it seemed like it was about once every decade that there was a homicide. That may have changed, but it seemed like it was almost like clockwork. Right.
This is not an annual occurrence. This is not
it's very unusual.
And again, me coming from Los Angeles County, we have law enforcement that deals with homicides way too regularly. Yeah. When you are dealing with a county where their homicide unit is getting a homicide every handful to tens of years is a very different thing. And I think sometimes it's hard to gain that perspective if that's not where you live. So I appreciate that. We had talked about Cross, and there was one area of Cross I forgot to ask about that I hope you can elaborate on a little bit and let me know if you can't. But one of the jaw-dropping moments for me of your cross-examination was that Kouri Richins thought it was a good idea to pick up the phone and call you. In January of 2023, she called you.
Yes.
Well, the defense kept trying to stop you. Nestor was saying, stop, don't say anything more. She asked about it because she seemed to insinuate that Kouri was trying to tell her side. You can't talk to her because she's represented by counsel. Yeah. But what went down, if you can share?
Well, I mean, I can elaborate just a little bit on what I said on the cross-examination.
Yes, please.
I had been conducting interviews in January 23, and I think that it was either the 18th or that day, the 19th, I spoke to one of her closest business associates. Now, keep in mind that an investigation, when you have a subject, that's the center of a circle. Kouri is the center of a circle that I'm drawing in my mind. And there's business associates.
Oh, no, that's you just being obsessed with her, Todd.
Yeah, right.
All eyes on me in the middle of a ring, just like a circus. Yes, Kouri's the middle, and all the spokes go out.
So the business associates are kind of in the outer ring, and the family and the friends are kind of on this inner ring. And I want to get to as many of those spokes in the wheel as I can before I get to the hub, before I get to the center point. Because I will know if that subject is lying to me or not, based upon the answers I've already gotten from everybody around them. And it also does have the effect of ratcheting up the pressure a little bit. I'll admit that. Someone is circling, you pay attention. And I touched
Right.
a nerve with this particular business associate. She calls me. She is hot and heavy. She is angry. She is saying something to the effect of, I'm right here. You can come talk to me anytime. I'm right over here, is what I recall. And I saw your commentary
Oh
on this,
boy.
and you opined that she may be calling me to call me a motherfucker. And I believe you are correct. I
I
believe
think
you
I
read
did.
that
I
situation
think
2020. You got that right on, EDB. She was calling to say that I was a motherfucker. She called me an idiotic private investigator in an email once, or maybe it was just stupid or something like that, but it was in an email to the police.
idiot seems to
Anyway,
be a word she likes a lot.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, she was ready to talk. And I, as I said in my cross, I can't talk to you. I'd love to talk to you. Let's set some time to talk. I need to talk with your lawyer first. That was it.
Because you're an arm of the lawyers for your client. And so speaking to a represented party is inappropriate. Even if they call you, it doesn't make it less inappropriate.
It doesn't matter because my ethics are to the lawyers I work for,
Yes.
and they can't ethically let her in their office, even if she says, I don't want my lawyers here. I want to talk to you. They
I want to
still
tell you
can't do
everything.
it. It's
Right.
not ethical, right? I think, first of all, it may be that Kouri forgot to tell them about that. I think that's entirely possible. I think she was looking for an answer that was, no, I never talked to your client. Oh, you mean in all of those years, you never decided to
Right.
talk with my client? Well, I absolutely wanted to speak with her, and I told her counsel at the time that we should definitely set up an interview because that's why she called me. She said, I'm right over
Yeah.
here. You can come talk to me anytime. And I'm like, great, let's do it. When? Uh, yeah, never got an answer. Didn't surprise me that I never got an answer.
Not surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah. Her
it's not a
lawyer
big
got a hold of
surprise.
her and went, you stop this immediately. And this is my speculation, of course, but any
Yeah,
lawyer would. And every
yeah,
time we've seen a high profile case I've covered where the lawyer walks their client into the police station and is like, client, sit down and talk. All the lawyers are sitting there going, why are you doing that? Don't
yeah,
do that. Don't let
yeah.
your client talk to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, Kouri Darden is not the first person to convict herself with her own words.
Yeah.
This is a well-known thing in the criminal defense arena in our system of justice. Your words can and will be used against you, and they most of the time are. Sometimes
Right.
that results in injustice, but not in this case. In this case, we
I do
found
not think
justice.
that is what resulted in this case at all. I absolutely do. And
Yeah,
it brings us to, because you've had a chance to watch the juror interviews, which is such an interesting part of a high profile televised case, is that you get to see them in court and then you get to see the jurors that you've looked at, vis-a-vis, and get to hear what they have to say after the fact and after they've processed it. But you also get to watch the verdict coming down, knowing what it feels like to wait for a verdict, knowing what it's like to be in that room as it comes down.
yeah,
I find that even when I'm watching the case from this side of the screen, it feels very similar to me as it did when I was in court. I think
yeah,
that's maybe a trauma response from being
yeah.
a
No,
trial lawyer
no,
for
I
so
think you're
long,
right.
but it
Yeah,
feels the same. And when we got word that the verdict was coming back in 3 hours, I was stunned. Were you surprised that it came back so quickly?
I was. I was less surprised at that amount of time than I would have been had the defense put on witnesses. I think that if there was another week to this case, as was
Yeah.
telegraphed and anticipated,
Anticipated?
uh,
Mm-hmm.
I anticipated Kouri wanting to testify, but only because I didn't believe that there was any set of lawyers that could manage her appropriately and keep her off of the witness stand. I thought she was too narcissistic and too self-deluded, but apparently I was wrong. They got that right. She, by the way,
Yeah.
I think I heard your assessment, and I agree with your assessment that the defense strategy under these circumstances was the best of a lot of bad choices that they had to make at that point. Uh, I've been
Yeah.
part of that defense huddle many times. I've been part of that decision many times, and If you know that the road ahead is nothing better than what you've already got, you throw in the towel, because a lot of bad things can happen. The worst time for an attorney is when your client is up on the witness stand, and there's nothing you can do to protect him anymore. By the way, had Kouri taken the witness stand, many of these evidentiary rulings would have been swept away, keeping all kinds of evidence out. It would have been a disaster. She was never going to get on the witness stand.
Yes. I wonder if in that, because we saw even in pretrial litigation, the defense heavily signaling Kouri's going to testify. I suspect, and this is purely my speculation, that the defense was able to tell Kouri, look, we have signaled you're testifying. We have told them you're testifying. We know this evidence hasn't come in. The prosecution's waiting for a rebuttal case. If we don't put on any witnesses, we block them and we get to kind of game them. And I wonder if they were able to gamify it for Kouri to make it feel like a position of power to say, oh, I'm not testifying because they're relying on it. And now we're going to pull the rug out from under them. And I wonder if they were able to communicate in that way with her to make it feel like a choice to kind of get at the prosecution versus where a lot of clients are going to be like, look, if you testify, this is everything that's coming in. I wonder if this was more you can stick it to them by not testifying. Let's pull the rug out from under them and sit down and do nothing. I just wonder if
I think it's plausible, the scenario that you're suggesting. It's at least plausible that could happen, if not in this case, certainly in many others. I just thought it was poignant that Kouri kept signaling through the publication of a book and the statements that she made to me and everything she was telling the police, that she just wanted her story to be heard, that she just wanted the truth to be known. So I guess that wasn't true. She didn't testify.
She had the
and she didn't put on a case. And, legally speaking, of course, we have to respect a defendant's right not to testify. We can't hold that against him. But I do think the defense raised a number of questions that they had to answer themselves, that couldn't just be left out there in the ether to be bundled into reasonable doubt all at the end. That's not how it's not how it works. I think if you're promising a rational explanation for why it is that Eric Richins ended up with this amount of fentanyl in his body, your alternative theory has got to have some meat to it. You've got to put some meat on the bones. You can't just say, well, it's horrible that a private investigator can do what the police can't, and we think that should be factor into your decision. I just didn't think that part of the closing argument was well thought out.
No, she was trying to indicate it was terrifying, and then said, well, our strategy's changed. But on that, when we got to the investigating officer that was on the stand, the defense was heavily insinuating about Eric's text messages, which we know that you also looked at, that those gifts that the prosecution played of the, I'm so rich and the idiots everywhere, that those had come from Eric's phone. Were you watching that unfold, just yelling at your computer going, those aren't from Eric's phone? Because the insinuation was so strong that they were running with it, and then they weren't able to deliver. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I think the importance of those images isn't outside their content, is about the time, and which is a very critical moment, and I mean minute moment of time in the evolution of this case. The idea that the defense could somehow take, so these are particular photographs that have no EXIF data, that have no metadata associated with them at all, because they've been deleted from a text messaging database. So what's significant is that they were displayed and deleted at that time. That's the last time the operating system saw them. That's the significance of them outside of it. No other conclusion about where it came from can be drawn from the evidence that is available, because all the metadata has been stripped. You cannot make an argument based upon any evidence that this came from a particular sender, that it came from, because of what Kouri did. She deleted the database
Right.
that these came from. Had she not done that, we could have found out more about these images. But again,
we saw Eric's phone.
Yeah.
So if they had been there, you would have seen them in his phone.
Correct.
You had Grossman's phone. If they were in Grossman's phone, you would have seen them.
Correct.
They had other phones.
The defense had all of that,
there's all these other phones. Yeah, there's all these other phones that if they had been on that side, you would have seen them. So we can at least start to say, well, they didn't come from this phone and this phone and this phone, because those phones were recovered and they weren't in there. Yeah. So where they came from, I'm not sure, but I don't think they ever had Kouri's mom's phone, and I don't think they had, grounds to get that. But I
believe they did at one time examine Lisa's phone. So there's that. Lisa has other issues, not tangentially related to this case, but I'll just say that.
Yeah, there's stuff in the civil cases that I've covered with that, but I will leave that alone. It was interesting to me that they were trying to connect it to Eric, and I'm like, but you have his phone. If it's on his phone, just show it. And
right.
This seemed like a very smart jury.
I mean, I think that goes back to your question about the time that they deliberated. They, right, they're right out the door. The door hasn't even slammed closed yet, and there's a note to the judge.
Yes.
It's like, what? That sprung like a mousetrap, man. That was insanely quick. And it was a detail about a stipulated fact.
Yes.
That they weren't clear on whether it was going to come as a document, an exhibit, or whatever. And I think it was an exhibit, actually. So that tells me everything. That tells you everything you need to know about the attention level of this jury. Also, looking at them from the witness stand, I can see like all 12 people are either looking at me, looking at one of the lawyers, or taking a note, looking at their notes. And it's clear to me from the juror interviews that they had really listened very carefully, and they looked at evidence. They ordered dinner. They had a talk about it, and they came to their decision. It sounds to me like they did what everyone could expect of them, which is to have an independent voice, come across with your own knowledge and reference about the case. I mean, that is really the beautiful thing that apparently the judge told them afterwards, which I really love about this statement. If 8 people, unknown to each other, can go into this situation and agree on something, one thing, 4 things, 6 things, probably got it right. Probably got it right. That's exactly as he is reported to have described it. And that's the beauty of it. And it can also sometimes be a real trouble. But, I mean, our system of government is horrible except for all the others, all the others are much worse.
And that's one of the things about our jury system, is really trying to take people who don't know each other and see if they can agree that this is what happened. And I think in this case, because of how attentive they were, now that we've heard the interviews from several of the jurors, because of how attentive they were, it made it easier for them to go through the evidence. And Utah has 8, not 12, so it's a little easier. You've got just a few less people to go through. And they came back with that verdict in the evening. Where were you watching that verdict? Same with a ice pack on the couch?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And
for sure.
I imagine your heart was just thumping, waiting for it, but also seeing the camera pan to your clients who you've been through this with, and knowing how stressful that moment is for them as well. So with it being televised, I'm glad you were able to be there and watch this verdict come in live like the rest of us did. When they picked the sentencing date, did you immediately clock that was Eric Richins' birthday? And did you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, this case has been some interesting timing. Eric was last known to be alive on my birthday, and the sentencing was set for his birthday this year. The universe has strange ways about it, Mrs. Baker.
It sure does.
Strange ways.
And it was interesting to hear because my ears immediately perked up. I was like, oh, that's unusual in a case and very interesting. And the defense didn't seem to catch it because I think they would have asked to change it.
Yeah.
And at sentencing, I think
the court must have been unaware of it. I think he was just going through and his nearest
availability
for that time frame, and there it was. And
I think so.
We'll see if that date holds. Who knows?
Sentencings can move. And I also want to thank you for taking all this time with us and sharing with the law nerds what's going on. With you, because I know everybody was a lot of compassion and concern for how you were recovering. I think you were definitely a hands down favorite witness in this case, just because you said what we were all thinking on the stand, and many don't have the opportunity to do that, but also for your diligence in this case. And then for taking the time to share your experience of this case with us, some things that we suspected and didn't know. And I suspect for being a bit of a law nerd now. So thank you.
Yes.
And
you'll have to
welcome.
You'll have to send me that comp membership now, won't you, Baker?
I absolutely will. Law nerd for life. You can't get rid of us, but it's so lovely
grateful.
Having you.
I want to make sure to say that I'm so grateful for all of the nice things that people have said and their concern for me. I'm truly, truly grateful for the kind thoughts that have been put out there. I'm even slightly grateful for the unkind thoughts too. It's all part of the deal. I'm super happy to be with you, and maybe when it's all over, we can have another conversation.
I would love that. So we will keep the law nerds posted on what you're up to. Please reach out at any time. Thank you for agreeing to have a conversation with me. I'm sure you've been inundated with requests for a conversation. I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk and share a little bit more about the behind the scenes and the answers you didn't get to always share on the stand, because I think it's clear how much work was done in this case and some of the questions you didn't get to answer. So thank you for answering them with us.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
All right, law nerds. I feel like that warrants a swoop as we get into, well, a little bit of overtime, because I've got thoughts, you've got questions, and I've got a clarification. So let's talk about that real quick. So I had the opportunity to reach out. I have said repeatedly, I am not a journalist. I am not a reporter. I am curious and I love having a conversation. I always hesitate to call them interviews because they're not really, I want to have a conversation. I always want to have a conversation. And I love that Mr. Gabler decided to have that conversation. And I say with us because it's not just me, it's all of us. And there were questions there that I know you wanted answers to that we don't have answers to yet. Hopefully one day we will get to have a conversation with Bryce and figure out what happened with Bryce's pants and that night at the Richins home, because I have so many questions about that. But also, in a follow-up to this, I did reach out to Attorney Bloodworth for official comment because I knew the law nerds would want to know. And then I realized as I was watching this back that I was so locked in with Mr. Gabler that I didn't ask about his paw nerd either. So I'm going to need to reach out to him for comment, and I will be back with you with that. But I reached out to Mr. Bloodworth for official comment on the interview, and he responded to that comment and said that his dog is Irwin. Irwin is in fact a border collie who is very smart and handsome. So law nerds, Mr. Bloodworth has you covered with the details that you want to know. Can we find out more about the case? No, not at this point. Will we try to have that conversation later? Yes, we absolutely will. Do I love it when people bring their pets into the office? Yes, I absolutely do. So yes, smart, handsome Irwin, the border collie, is the official response to my request from Mr. Bloodworth. So yes, when we're not there where we can have a conversation about the cases yet, there's still another prosecution and there is still a sentencing to be had. But on the subject of the pupper, we have that question. And I think that there were some moments in that interview where you and I all learned some new things together that I am still just buffering about. First of all, we kind of suspected that Kouri was staring down Gabler in the courtroom. We kind of gathered that from some of the other witnesses and the moments where she was looking towards a witness because the cameras were right back where the witness was, but looking at the witness being like, what? I think we saw Kouri saying in court, and I'm going to go back and look for the moment, like, he's obsessed with me. And I think we were chatting about that at the time, but the fact that he could hear it in court is absolutely wild. We learned a lot more about the investigation into the hunting trips in Mexico, and learning that the defense asked the question, did you call anyone in Mexico or travel to Mexico? Having his report, knowing that the outfitters were from Arizona, knowing that the hunting buddy is also in the States, and knowing that he was on the phone with the hunting friend, and then trying to spin that was absolutely wild to me. Just what are we doing? But again, they were putting that out there to see if it would be followed up on. But the question was so narrow, and we saw the prosecutors not getting swirled into, as I described it, as a hurricane. The prosecutors weren't getting swirled into the bullshit storm and trying to play whack-a-mole with every single thing that the defense threw out there. And I have criticized other prosecutors for doing exactly that, where it felt like they were trying to play whack-a-mole with the defense theories and losing at that badly. You've got to just try your case. Learning that one of the things that really put a point on the curiosity around Carmen was that she didn't attend the funeral, and seeing how much conversation Carmen was having with Kouri and that she didn't go to the funeral made the moment in court all the more pointed to me, looking back, that she had the card and I think it was the program from his funeral in her home. I think that says a lot about how Carmen was feeling and how interested Gabler was. I also didn't realize that Gabler had never spoken to Carmen. I didn't really think about it. But then when I'm looking at it going, oh, the two of them did not talk. That was an interesting detail for sure. Then when we got to talking about the GPS car tracking, I was fairly stunned to learn that, one, they were well aware of those go bags right at the beginning. Because when we hear about the go bags in trial, I was like, oh, what now? What now with go bags? But then that it was being reported and people had observed that Kouri seemed to have been drinking when she was showing up at the kids' sporting events, when she was driving the kids. I can only imagine the stress that must have caused the family. And of course, Gabler was going to be tracking her movements very closely in all of that. But I was very surprised to learn that detail. Of course, that's not going to come up at trial, but I know you can. The Lawnards are an empathetic bunch, but to learn how stressed the family must have been adds another level to the fact that when we get to the bond hearing, how strongly Amy Richins feels that Kouri needs to be kept in custody, because it goes beyond just grief. It gets into a level of fear, and that Kouri was leveraging the kids. And we've heard that, and we've seen snips of that behavior throughout the trial and in some of the motions. And then looking back, and I'm so glad we did. I didn't realize how illuminating it would be to look back at the bond hearing and the statements made by Amy then in hindsight with all the trial. Because as Gabler said in the interview, sometimes a fact doesn't resonate the same way until you have more information. And for me, some of that is the golf tournament that was on Eric's birthday, the fact that the kids were being separated from their father's family. I'm very sensitive to that. I hated seeing it in the Adelson case. I hated seeing it in cases that I have worked. I I hate it when children are used as leverage in cases for somebody to get what they want. And unfortunately, it happens all too much. It is a sad reality of a lot of cases. And that point being highlighted was stunning. Then I think it went by so fast at trial that I was buffering on it, and some of y'all were buffering with me when Grossman talked about the fact that he reached out to the Richins family first, and then the Richins family put him in touch with Gabler because he was feeling guilt over the affair. And the Gabler's like, I want to make sure that he's feeling guilt over the affair, sure, but I want to make sure he's not feeling guilt as an accomplice. And I think that those were not Gabler's exact words, but I want to find out if this is guilt for having an affair or if this is guilt for more. And it was really interesting to hear Gabler talk about his extensive conversations with Grossman and the fact that Grossman, in his mind, didn't know, and then was processing the information in real time. And the defense heavily insinuated that Grossman was told that Kouri had committed this murder before that arrest. And that's why I was asking about the timing of it. And it was interesting that though there was a contact before, that question, it seems, came after the arrest was already made public, that the children's book happened first, and then they had the conversation where he asked about, well, I think Kouri did this after she was arrested. It was also interesting to me to see the way that Gabler was going back and looking at the attempted murder before it was charged. When Kouri was arrested, they did not charge her with the attempted murder, and it took quite a while for that to be added. So when Kouri was arrested, they were looking at the murder, and then Gabler was back looking at what happened on Valentine's Day because in his mind, the amount of fentanyl was, and I used the word overcorrection, but a massive overcorrection on someone who is trying to iterate and do this better, trying to make sure that it was all consumed in one go. And then him talking about the difference between a sandwich and a drink and a lemon drop shot and then more. And I wonder again, and Bloodworth brought it up in closing, but I wonder again if that's why we saw a shot and a Moscow Mule. And Bloodworth talked about it in closing to make sure it was all in, and then more just in case because it hadn't worked on Valentine's Day. Julie in the chat said, can't believe we are having this amazing man on, my favorite witness. Thank you, Emily, you rock. It's largely in part to the law nerds in this community that we've built. You heard Gabler talk about watching how our chat was having conversations, and choosing to have this conversation with us speaks to this community, I think, in a very big way. And I'm so glad that he did. I also was just delighted to get to have that conversation, which I think was clear. And Gabler had been watching our coverage here together of this case seemingly for quite a while, which is smart because we've talked about this case since the beginning. And I suspect he's not the only one. And law nerds, you know it too. So if anyone else would like to chat, my email's down below. It's just a conversation. And, the lawyer in me adheres to parameters maybe differently than the media might, because that's what's comfortable for me. I just want to have a conversation. And then we got to follow up on the moment that I was stunned by. And it sounds like Gabler thought the defense was stunned by too, that it was like, oh, well, Kouri wanted to tell her side and you wouldn't talk to her. And he's like, she called me. I was like, damn. Kouri called him and did in fact call him everything but a child of God, and was cursing him. And chat, you guys clocked it immediately. You guys were like, oh, because he was talking to the business partners. He was starting to mess with her money. She called him after he was interviewing business partners. And Kouri is like, hands off my money. And so Kouri calling him and being like, I'm right here. Come at me, bro. Wild conversation, wild conversation. And then he was like, go get your lawyer and come on back and we'll have a chit chat. We'll have a chit chat with your lawyer. And then of course, that never came to fruition. But it's interesting that he thought the defense was surprised by that answer because it would have been in all of his reports. Do you think they went through all of them? Do you think they went through all the reports? And if they did, do you think they remember? Because I don't think Nestor remembered all the reports when she was asking questions. And I think that was highlighted. And I didn't realize that the computer, and maybe I lost this detail in trial, but that the computer for C&E was a computer tower. And she was trying to insinuate that he was taking the C&E computer out of the home when he's carrying a laptop. And it's a freaking computer tower. Like, they're not this. These two things are not the same. They're not the same at all. And so the fact that they were trying to insinuate him carrying a laptop out was the tower is absolutely wild to me. But again, it tracks. And when he was talking about, I don't even know if Kouri told her attorney she had called me. Kouri was with prior counsel then. And when there was a conflict on the case and Sky's firm, Sky and the firm that she works for, all of them were conflicted out of the case together. There's only so much they can pass on to not taint new counsel, which is the issue we saw in the Adelson case when there was that false start with trial starting the first time in Adelson when all the attorneys had to be taken off the case and were kind of cordoned off. You can turn over discovery, but you can't have a conversation about every detail because you can't impart that knowledge. But when that phone call happened, that would have been before Kouri was even arrested. Sky would have been her attorney at that period of time. And I imagine at that time, her lawyer's like, we are not having this conversation because all you can do is make things worse for yourself. This was before Kouri was arrested. So this is while they're investigating the estate. And of course, Gabler was keeping an eye on everything that might go to the criminal case as well. You can see how his mind works. He's like, of course I'm working on the estate, but there are these things that I want to know. And as he's investigating this, he's like, I think Kouri did this before she was arrested. So with that, I'm going to answer some of your questions because you've got questions and I don't know what that loud noise was. We're going to answer some of your questions and then we're going to be off and away till tomorrow because we've got lots to cover up here on the channel, but I really wanted to make that interview happen. Be mindful of Mr. Gabler's time because I think it's very clear that he and I could have spoken for another like 3 or 4 hours, which we will also need to do, being mindful that he is still recovering from an incredibly serious surgery and being mindful of time and energy as it is, which is hard for me because when I am in a conversation, I'm just like, tell me everything. We can talk for 5 hours and I lose track of time. So trying to be mindful of that for sure. So let's get to some of your questions. Thank everybody who gifted memberships and, you know, get on to our Tuesday. I know all of you were like, but Emily, we stream for 6 hours. Not every day we don't. Not every day we don't. And EDB has a bunch of stuff she is behind on. We'll talk about it. We need to chat. It's just chat. It's time to chat. Chat. It's time to chat. Chat. We need to chat because sometimes it's questions. Sometimes it's a chat. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. Chat. We need to chat. Also, on a personal note, we have been incredibly busy up at Household Baker. And I don't know how much I can talk about without starting to cry. So if I yeet the middle of my sentence, I'll just stop talking. But my kiddo had his final high school winter guard performance this weekend. I know, I can't. Ooh, breathe. We're breathing. We're breathing. I am not prepared for it to be the end of senior year. There is so much going on. It is such a busy time of year, but got to travel out of state. Emily, what are you going to do now that you're not driving multiple states every single weekend and stopping at Buc-ee's? I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself, but he was incredible. I am so proud. I will share a little bit of that with you guys a different day. I can't talk about it today. Half the time I can't even watch his Cavaliers performances without crying. We've tried to do it on members only, and I'm like, I just love it so much. I just love it so much. But it's that time of year, man, where things are starting to wrap up, and it's been busy. The evenings have been busy. The stuff at school has been busy, and it's busy. So if the questions are ever, why aren't we fill in the blanks? Because the senior year stuff is real. And I know I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention it again. On a personal note, when we are done with graduation, my kiddo leaves. My kiddo leaves to move in for summer tour, like I think within 48 hours of high school graduation. We can do this, Emily. We can do hard things. But then after summer tour ends for DCI, he ends tour on like truly for Cavaliers, like Sunday morning, because they have some really beautiful traditions. But he moves in for college Monday. Finals are Saturday. Farewell is Sunday. He moves into college Monday. So from the time we get to May, my kid's got maybe 72 hours at home total until November. So, it's a lot. So I know there's a lot of trials going on. My evenings are busy with the kiddos, and we've got to do all of the college stuff now because he's gone in May. Like we've got like 4 weeks to get everything ready for college, because once he graduates, he's off on tour. So that's a lot of why. Also, back-to-back trials are incredibly difficult in the way that I do trial coverage. So there will be times we will be jumping in and out, but everyone needs a reset. Sometimes we'll go back and watch, sometimes we won't, but there are times we need a little bit of moments, and it's tough. And so that's part of it, because and I said that when we started covering Richins, that there was going to be a gap of family time needed where I can't be in back-to-back trial coverage every day. And right now is one of those periods where I can't be in back-to-back trial coverage every day, especially not with the investment and the level of investment. So Token asked, is he going straight from DCI into college marching band? He'll be home for 24 hours, maybe. So, yep. Straight from, it's graduation, DCI, college marching band, Thanksgiving, and then college winter guard. And then DCI. We are now on this cycle where he is going to be home for the next 4 years for handfuls of time until he ages out of DCI. And I'm so proud of him. But also it's the reality of I cannot stream 8 hours plus a day while we're trying to get ready to move into college. Because this time is limited, and trials, there will be a next one and we will cover it. But this period of time is very brief. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at on that. So if the question is ever, Emily, why? Here are the things to ask yourself. Does it conflict with kiddo stuff right now? Yes. And is the victim a minor? That's the second question to ask. If the victim is a minor, we are not covering it live. My father's alibi, thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting, and thank you for the gifted memberships. Richard the Magician, I did not ask Bloodworth for comment on the Lawnard language, but it was pretty clear to me, and I the zoom and the swoop of it all. But also, once Bloodworth said Lawnards, and I can't even play clip 214 because I've had all of the sound stuff. But once we got to docket 214, every Lawnard on the internet calls it the walk the dog letter. I knew, you knew, we all knew, all of us knew. So, morning cow 155 or 155 said, not me with a 3-year-old and a 2-week-old now crying over them leaving for college. Yes, I'm sorry. And yes, and it changes there's always tomorrow to like, oh God, there's a timer, but it's amazing. Again, it is such a blessing to have a kid who is so ready and excited for all the things that are coming next. I can process my own emotions. I'm so excited for him, and nothing makes me happier than seeing him ready. I can't imagine what the feeling would be like on the other side. And I don't want to be like, but buddy, you're welcome to be here forever. Like, I love having you here. I'm so excited that he gets to spread his wings and push himself. He's ready. He's ready to go. So it's a wonderful thing when your kids are ready for what comes next. I know. So that's a lot of what's going on over here. So I know there are other trials going on. I am sure they are fascinating. We had been waiting for the Richins trial for years. There is nothing coming up to trial right now that I have been tracking as closely. And one of the cases I've been tracking a bit more in the background is going to get pushed out a little bit more. So we'll keep an eye on it. But do not worry. We have lots of other cases that we need to catch up on. Lots and lots. Ellie B, good to see you, said, this is the greatest way to celebrate my 3rd year as a law nerd. Love this community and the continuing education provided by EDB ESQ. Everyone, speaking of continuing education, who is going to testify should 100% be looking at how Gabler approaches being on the witness stand and his description of being on the witness stand. It is such a good description. And though I have done witness stuff in mock trial, I have not been on the witness stand in a real trial. I mean, I had never even seen prosecutors get on the witness stand until some of the trials we've been covering. But I think it is a really apt description. Even someone who works in court the way that Gabler does and works in cases, being a witness is different, even if you're familiar with court. So for people who have never done that before, it is such a wild experience. And I know a number of you shared that, including finding serotonin. This is a 10 out of 10 play on words and names. Really appreciated how he described the feeling of being in the witness box. I've had to explain that experience, or I've had that experience. It's such a strange thing to explain. And I agree. And I think it's like jumping out of an airplane. Like, there's a lot of adrenaline. You don't know what to expect, and you're not all the way in control because you can only answer the questions you're asked. And if you want more questions to be asked, sometimes it's not going to happen. And so you have to wait, which I would be terrible at. I would be like, but there's but there's more. You never talk to anyone in Mexico. No, because they're not in Mexico. They're not. It would be so difficult. It would be so difficult. So can we have him come back to comment on investigations? I will always ask. Mr. Gabler. I'm going to make sure that he recovers well, but I will always ask. H. Duva, 4376, Emily, yes. I just went to visit ASU, where my youngest is headed 2,300 miles from home, and my oldest is headed to college in the fall. Is also headed to college in the fall. That is a lot of college. ASU will be a good time. I visited ASU. I had friends that went to ASU. They're going to run into a lot of people from my former high school alma mater because it is a very popular location. The football games will be so much fun. The heat is a whole different things. Just get flip-flops now. Just lots of flip-flops. Just lots of flip-flops. Scorpions are a real thing. Arizona is its own place. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun to visit. Plus, I think My Chemical Romance is playing in Arizona in the fall. So, if you need to go see a concert across the country, it's not that you need to check on your kiddo. It's that you need to see a concert and kiddo happens to be there. So, lots of fun to be had at ASU. There is an ice cream place. I'm going to forget the name of the ice cream place. Chat will let me know, the ASU folks. But there is an ice cream place that when I go to visit, Candace and I are just like, this is the place. This was the place in college. This is still the place. It's fantastic. David said in the chat, so I officially accepted a place in law school yesterday. Thanks, EDB and the Law Nerds, for helping me get to this place in my life. David, I'm so excited for you. And I hope that if my channel and others have helped make law school less scary and more of a, oh my God, we're going to go see how everything fits together. It's this and it's this and it's this. That energy going into law school is so important, of the exploration and the learning and being ready to, like, I don't even know what we're going to see. And then being able to tie those concepts back to some of the cases we've watched. I wish that we had cases as frequently being aired as we do now when I was in law school, because reading about it is one thing, but seeing things play out in court is so incredibly helpful. And movies don't always depict it quite right, though. I was just heavily inspoed, loved the law movies, but it would be so interesting to be in 1L and being in the midst of learning things and then being able to watch them play out in trial would be so fantastic. Just so fantastic. Allie, thank you so much. EDB interviews are always a delight. I hope so. I love a conversation. There will be some that are like, why is she talking so much? Welcome to my channel. It's just because we love to. We love to. Cindy, thank you. Cindy said senior year is so emotional. All the feels 13 years later. I have all the feels. But I also, like, I'm so grateful and I'm so excited. And I'm like, it truly is all of the feels at once. And we're doing 1 week at a time on that and making sure we have like all of the photos. I will share some snippets of Winter Guard now that Winter Guard is done, because Travis said that I could, and it's just been fun. Tiffany said petition for John Malkovich to play Gabler. I've seen lots of petitions to have various people play Gabler in the story as it plays out in this case. And I am interested to see, of course, after recovery, which is its own journey, what Gabler shares with us next. I can't wait. I'm like, get the man a podcast, a book. I want to hear about the life experiences. I want to know about the cases. I want to know more about the federal case with the 300 victims. And there's just so much interesting, work and life experience. And when you see a lot, and the traveling and the tying work back in the early days of trying to track down the CSAM, like there's so much there to explore that we just didn't have time to. And I didn't want to run off on a tangent and exhaust Mr. Gabler's energy as he's recovering before we got back to this case. So another day, another like just work chat day where we just have a vibe about all the stories and for the things that he has worked on. And yes, Michelle, the FBI, it came in. The FBI, it came in. And I'll allow it. So thank you all for the compliments. I appreciate it. Hospice RN, thank you so much. There's just always I feel like we're here together as a channel. It's like the Law Nerds hosted by EDB. And I always want to make sure you guys are, well, just aware of how we're deciding things, what we're covering, how we're covering, and when, and also acknowledge the energy that certain things take, because I don't think we talk about it enough, but also where the choices get made on how to balance time. Because while there are times I would love to be able to jump from trial to trial to trial to trial, because there's always going to be another one queuing up, I also have to rein it in and find that balance, because doing that burned me out in the DA's office, and I'm very mindful of it. I'm also mindful that I have choice in a way that I didn't when I was at the DA's office, especially as a younger DA, and that there are times it is okay, even though I feel very pulled to be like, oh, we could talk about this, to say, right at this moment, we're just going to hit pause for a minute and it will be okay. And we will get the next one. Because I understand once you're kind of on the wave, it's easy to stay on the wave. It's harder to say, you know what, we're going to miss a few sets. To bring back a surfing example, I'm very inspired by the Hawaii. The very, very, very apt analogy that sometimes the FOMO pulls you in and sometimes you have to say, it's okay, we'll get it. and the pause is very real. So trying to make sure that I balance that. Melody said, would love to hear about career paths from experts. 100%. And I love how Gabler talked about tying in all his own personality, his experience, and what he enjoyed, and pulling that all together into a career and finding it, because it's not always easy to find a career that you're wanting to navigate and that you're fascinated by for 30 plus years. It's an absolute blessing to be in a career path where you're like, I still love this shit. I want to talk about it. I want to do it. I love it. And there's times when you have to pull back for yourself, your life, your family, but to still love it and be in it. I love that. And I hope that everybody is able to find that. It is so fascinating. So let's see. There's a couple questions about cases that I don't recognize the names of. I am now getting into the work of what's coming next. So don't worry. We've got a lot that's coming up next. We are overdue for some food court. Afro Man, like, half counted as food court. There's also some interesting follow-up we need to do for the Afro Man case. There's some more follow-up on the Richins case with other juror interviews that have come out. There is still a lot going on in the cases that we have covered and some new cases that we will be bringing in. I am like 15,000, 100,000 plus pages behind in some of the civil cases that I'm starting to feel very pulled by. So there's much to do with all of that. So, Mr. Gabler messaged me back when I asked for follow-up on the pupper. Henry is Mr. Gabler's pupper. So thank you, Todd, for sharing. I was so locked in, I completely forgot to ask. And then I needed to do the journalistic follow-up of what everybody's pupper's name are. So Henry and Irwin are the puppers that have been shared. And a lot of you have said you would encourage Gabler to do a podcast. I think it would be great when he feels ready. So yes, but again, when you're focused on recovery, it's really hard to stay in it and not kind of squirrel to other events. So the focus is difficult, but yes, thank you, Mr. Gabler. I appreciate it. So let's see. How is Dr. B handling the upcoming life changes? Well, he is steadfast as Dr. B is. He is steadfast and practical. And he's also like, it's going to be fine. Like, this is so much easier than when we were doing it. Like, when we were going through college, it was just a totally different time and connectivity wasn't the same that it is. It's going to be okay. Like, if he forgets something at home, it's really not that big. Like, none of this is that big of a deal. He's going to be great. He's not going to forget to eat. He is going to be fine. And I think him going on tour last summer helped very much with me know that he's going to be okay. Look, if you can do a DCI tour, you're going to be fine in college. Like, if you can do a tour summer, you're going to be okay. And so I love my late night chat buddy. You know, Travis and I have the best late night talks. So that I will miss. And that is, again, something that I don't have to miss because we can still hop on the phone and chat. And we'll have time to do that. So Henry, did he come across the ocean? I did not ask. I will do more follow-up. We will have to do a Ponard chat and do more follow-up. And maybe Mr. Gabler will let us know. So let's see. There are a lot of questions about other cases. We will see what we get to with other cases. There are some things that I might touch on the podcast. Things that I don't cover live. We'll see how we get there. Exactly, Trisha. That's exactly what FaceTime is for. And again, Travis is very good at communicating via meme. So we have a really good time. We are going to have to talk about Instagram though another day, and the fact that DMs are no longer encrypted. We have so much tech talk we need to get to. We've been busy, but we have tech talk to get to. So it's all of the all. And I'm I'm excited, and it's busy. Kat, don't worry about it, said, I probably missed it. What's DCI? Drum Corps International is the most intense level of marching band. And it is a whole thing, but they go on tour for the summer. So when they move out for tour, They are 12 plus hour days. It is physically and mentally grueling, and it is incredible. You can find videos of the performances, but it is a lot to live on multiple buses with people all summer. It is a lot to sleep on floors in a basketball gymnasium. Hey, I'm just talking about you. I heard George come in. We were just talking about DCI and how grueling it was. And how we know that if you can survive a DCI tour summer, college is going to be much easier than that. So George, on the other hand, is not going to survive. I always forget which way. Hi.
That's all good.
Oh, he's purring. Listen to him. Yeah, your boy's home. Oh, okay. Down we go. But yeah, George is going to have a harder time, I think, than T.
Well, he had a hard time over the summer.
He did.
That's for sure.
He didn't want to talk to you for weeks when you got back. So anyway. Yes, T is going to continue with guard in college. He's going to do winter guard and fall marching season. So anyway, we were just
DCI if I don't like die.
that. Don't put that out to the universe.
I don't know how else to put it. Like it's just
Yeah, he will do DCI as long as his body holds out. As long as the shoulders don't go, we'll be fine. All right. George is he's going to follow you out the second you go. Good to see you, T. Glad you're home.
Hey, everyone.
Say bye to Leonards. Bye, Leonards. All right. All right. I'll see you in a few. George, are you staying with me? I doubt it. But yes, we talked about this on a members only when T got back from this last summer on tour. George would walk up to him and then sit next to him with his back to him. He's like, I need to be with you, but I need to tell you that I'm upset. But we did FaceTime with George as much as we could. So, I know T's shirt is fantastic. It's just, he's just a cool kid. I dig my kids. I know. It's one of those ages where kids can be challenging, but I dig hanging with my kids. So I feel very blessed for that. And George will be okay. We'll take care of him. We'll make sure he's good. Don't worry. It is. Lindsay said it's such a cat thing to do. It is. It's like, I'm so mad at you, but I love you and I miss you. We'll take care of it. So I know you guys have seen T pop in and out of stream for the last 6 years. So yeah, it's a lot. They grow a lot in that time. Same with G. They've grown a lot and you guys have been here for it. And I appreciate you being here with me to do this, because I saw a couple of you ask, how do you have the connections that you do, to do these interviews? And it's because of this community. It's because of how we show up in this community. It's because of the type of coverage that we do and the care that we give it. And yes, we will have some fun with the way that things happen in trial and the moments in court that are funny and the moments that just stop us and we go, are we kidding? But we're also going to take care with that, which is why the lawyers tend to catch most of the commentary on this channel, because they're the only ones that really choose to be there, them and the judge. Everyone else is kind of brought into it in a variety of different ways or choices. So it's because of this community, and it's because, well, to not put it too bluntly, we're the largest stream that covers trials. When we're covering a trial, we have the most live concurrent viewers, and it is noticed. And not everyone who reaches out wants to get on the microphone and chat about it. But I've said it before, we have witnesses reach out, some that you'll never hear about because they don't want that shared. And so we don't. But we have people that reach out to let us know how much they appreciate what we do here. We have people that reach out that want to talk. We have some people that reach out that really don't love what we do here, and that's okay too. But it's noticed. And the way that we do things is noticed. And so that is how. It's because of what we do and how we do it. So yeah, the chat is just a font of information for those looking at cases. And I like to build relationships. It is not ever going to just be a, oh, I want to talk to this person because it's going to get at this and this and that. I want to have conversations that I'm interested in and that I think we'd all be interested in, and cover the cases that I'm interested in and I think we'd all be interested in, and where I can also help have that conversation and be objective in having that conversation. And there will be some trials that I will opt out of because I just don't have a ton of objectivity, and I'll let you know. And then there's some trials where we have objectivity, but also a lot of information, and we'll make that clear too. This one, I want to see how the evidence comes in, but I got a lot of information. And the more information I have, the more information you have, the harder sometimes it is to see things the way that you would see them if you don't have that information. And we just talk about that too. And I love that. So we will be covering some food court. We will be catching up on other trials. And well, at the end of the day, we'll be here having conversations about everything that's going on in law around here. And we're going to keep doing that. So a huge thank you to y'all for being a part of this community. A huge thank you to Mr. Gabler for spending the time and for being a law nerd and for sharing his expertise with us. Yorkie Mom, yeah, I actually want to talk about this. We're going to have a deeper conversation about this, Yorkie Mom, but thank you for bringing this up. Afro Man was tough. The trial was tough. The trial was tough to watch. And I think it highlights, and this is a conversation we will have as we talk a little bit more about that case, I think it highlights the experience you can have of something just seeing clips on the internet. Because there were clips of Afro Man I saw, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then when we watched the entire thing, I was just outraged. And I think all of you were kind of along with me on that. And it's so interesting seeing how very different the experience is versus seeing little snippets of it. And then when you have the full context of the trial, how overwhelmingly frustrating it is to just watch injustice play out. And at the end of the day, that case gives me a lot of hope. So for those of you that are like, I was too angry, I couldn't finish it, fair. At the end of the day, it gave me hope because you watch a group of jurors that watched what happened in that courtroom, that clocked it the same way that we did, and lives in that community. Think about those jurors sitting across from 7 members of the sheriff's department that works in their community. People that they're going to see at the grocery store. People that they're going to see when they're dropping their kid off at school because one of them's a school resource officer. And to sit there across from them and have the courage that plaintiff's counsel asked them to. Plaintiff's counsel said, be courageous. And they were. Plaintiff's counsel didn't clock where the courage was needed. The courage to tell them no was tremendous. It gives me a lot of hope. So even though we watched some wild decisions made by the court, we still saw jurors sit there, look across from those who work in their community and say no. And that is inspiring. So even though there was so much frustration in that case, and even though the clips on the internet seemed like it was going to be kind of a funny case, and then it just definitely wasn't, the hope and really the inspiration that you can still get 12 people out of a community to stand on what's right is, I think, a really good takeaway. And it highlights why we have a jury system. Because I have no doubt in my mind that that judge wanted it to go differently. after watching how he acted when the verdict came in. No doubt in my mind. And if it had been up to the judge, I do not think Afro Man would have won that case. But then you see members of the community put their foot down. And that takeaway is huge. And we're going to talk about that more. So you'll hear me repeating some of these thoughts because I was frustrated. I was real frustrated watching that happen. You saw me in real time. It's hard to watch and it's uncomfortable to watch. And I think that's what's so important about this case. And I'm sure Afro Man leans into the clips because it's what's going to get the case picked up and it's what's going to grow it on social media. But when you take a step back from the clips and watch the entire trial, it's a bit chilling. And I'm glad that we saw it to fruition. And I'm glad that we saw a jury push back. And I'm just, proud is not the right word. I don't know what the word is. I'm proud of those jurors. I'm grateful to them and inspired by them for the courage that would have taken. And that gives me a lot of hope. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity to watch all of that. And I'm glad so many of you reach out and were like, we've got to look at this case, because I think it was needed to see that pushback on this case and how much courage that would have taken. So I'm inspired, I think is maybe the right word, and hopeful, because that's my takeaway from watching the jury be incredibly courageous. And it do the right thing has taken on so many meanings on this channel, but to do the thing that was just, because big fan of justice, big fan of justice. So we will talk about that more, because we're going to talk about the juror interviews. Heartened is a good word for it. Like it's yes. And we'll talk about it because you guys have so many more questions. We're going to talk about it for sure. So we will be talking more about the Afro Man case. We'll be talking more about the Richins case as we start to get closer to the sentencing memorandums and things like that. I will be checking in to see if sentencing memorandums are filed in the Banfield case, because we're going to be talking about the Banfield sentencing in May. We've got a lot of court hearings, and then there's a couple court hearings we need to catch up on in the Karen Reed case. We're going to be busy. But for today, I'm going to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Law Nerd. I will see you on stream tomorrow. We are overdue for a food court. Unless, as always, unless something pops off in the meantime, which it sometimes does. And if you do not have the Law Nerd app, now is my time to remind you. We are so close to breaking another milestone in the Law Nerd app that would make Team Baker super happy. We are very close to over 150,000 Law Nerds in the Law Nerd app. So if you do not have our free Law Nerd app and would like to stay in the loop, make sure you download that on iOS and Android. It is free for you. We built it for you so we can keep you in the loop. We did some little sneak peeks of this interview today in the Law Nerd app this morning. I always try not to notify too early for our West Coast and international crew, but I know that you guys can turn notifications off and on your devices. So I know that you will use the do not disturb when needed, but it helps me let you know when we're streaming. And for those of you that are like, what version of EDB time are we on today? There will always be an app notification as we are just getting ready to go live. So if the EDB standard time is but when is Emily going live? We'll always send you a notification because it's 11-ish. It's 11-ish. So I will see you tomorrow around 11 a.m. Central EDB time. And we will be talking, maybe food court, unless something wild happens. So Law Nerds, you are the best. Don't forget, it also updates you on what's going on the Emily Show channel where the podcast lives. This week on the podcast, I forgot to mention, this week on the podcast, I talk about Savannah Guthrie's interview? Emily, you were saying goodbye and you squirreled. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. Hold on. For those of you that didn't watch the podcast yet, the shit that's going down with the Pima County Sheriff's Department is fucking wild. Did you guys watch the podcast yesterday? What in the world is happening in Pima County? Even if you don't care what Savannah Guthrie said in her interview, there are timestamps. Go look at what's happening in Pima County. The sheriff's deputy getting arrested. The 22-year-old sheriff's deputy getting arrested. Oh my God. And then Nanos and the recall. Literally, this shit is bananas. BANANAS. So we're definitely not done talking about Pima County. I don't know if we will ever know what happened with Nancy Guthrie, but oh boy, have things gotten wild. So the app also notifies you when stuff goes up on the Emily Show channel so that you don't have to worry about navigating which channel. Plum wild. Heather said my 2-year-old said absolutely wild while listening to EDB yesterday. Heather, I am so happy that your 2-year-old is just, part of the Lawnard crew. That I am sorry when your little Lawnard starts saying things like objection when you're asking them to like eat broccoli when they're 5, but I promise you the adventure is worth it. So we will be talking more about Pima County. We will. So stay in the loop with the Lawnard app. And it's a Yorkie mom. And many of you said it. It's messy. It's so messy. Vivacious. What instrument does Travis play? He plays guitar quite well, but in band, he throws things. Rifles, sabers, flags. He's in color guard. So he is a weapon line color guard member. He spins things very high in the air. I'll share some of it. Harmony said, I don't understand the broccoli slander. Look, I love broccoli too. It has just been my experience that it's a taste that you need to grow into. Because I love broccoli, but the littles, not always as much. Not always as much. They object on occasion. So with that, Lawnards, you are the best. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Lawnard. I appreciate you. And Aaron said, did he get a complimentary membership? The YouTube algorithm won't let us gift membership specifically, but we're going to have to go send the Lawnard stuff, some of our Lawnard goods to Mr. Gabler. Do not worry. All right, Lawnards, you are the best. Mods, thank you so much. Thank you, Team Baker, for making everything happen. Even when, for those of you asking, Emily, are we going to record a behind the scenes podcast? Yes, when I'm not recording at an ungodly hour in the middle of the night because my entire audio interface crashed. You saw the beginnings of it during the last live stream where the mic started to crackle. Things came off the rails, and it was a struggle. It was a struggle this week, but we're back. I'm going to go finish fixing that. I will see you soon tomorrow. Make sure you have the app. I love being here with you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, Lawnard. Thank you for joining me. Make sure you don't miss a live stream or any of the updates on the cases that you care about most with the Lawnard app at lawnardapp.com. It's a free download on iOS and Android, so I can keep you in the loop, because you never know when something's going to pop off. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being a Lawnard.